Return to the past with a warehouse. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376, Yaoniang's first laparotomy. His Majesty made a difficult decision, which was to agree to the imperial physician to examine the princess and formulate an operation plan. The queen was not very familiar with these things, but she could see two things clearly. The traditional pharmacopoeia was helpless against the princess, and the princess was almost certain to die. The Liyuan faction might still have a glimmer of hope, and if it was used, it might live, but if it was not used, it would definitely die. So she also firmly supported letting the imperial physician give it a try. Concubine Chen strongly opposed it, and even said such rebellious words as "you don't feel sorry for her, because she is not your own flesh and blood." His Majesty asked someone to take Concubine Chen out to wake up, but he was concerned about Concubine Chen's love for his daughter, so he didn't have an attack at the time, but he remembered her in his heart. In short, the doctor who had studied in Liyuan was ordered to preside over the treatment plan for the third princess. Fortunately, the princess really had sudden acute appendicitis, which was basically diagnosed after percussion and observation. The two doctors had personally participated in the laparotomy of rabbits and mice in Liyuan, so they were not completely inexperienced, so they arranged the operation. Now it seems that the matter is very simple in the Queen's letter, but in fact, it was as tense as a war. Environmental disinfection, equipment preparation, blood transfusion, plasma preparation. From preoperative preparation to postoperative recovery, they could not do any of them to the extent of Liyuan, and each of them had great risks. But after all, the princess was cured by the laparotomy and survived. Except for a scar on the abdomen, there were no other sequelae. The third princess was angry about the scar at first, but later she thought that she would be recorded in history books as the first case of surgery and her courage would be recorded by future generations, so she felt balanced. After this incident, His Majesty the Emperor rewarded the two imperial doctors and turned his ambiguous attitude towards the technical system into clear support. Not long after a fierce court struggle, the summary of the situation of Donglei Prefecture and Chengyang Prefecture last year was also delivered. According to the tax report, Chengyang Prefecture was almost brand new. Thanks to the technological innovation of the salt industry, the entire commercial tax directly tripled. There was also a considerable increase in grain production. Not only was the new varieties brought by Liju high in yield, but the most important thing was that the drip irrigation system allowed more land and manpower to be put to use. The per acre yield in most places did not increase significantly, but the total amount still changed significantly. So His Majesty the Emperor directly designated a circle of newly added test sites. Liju was confused when he learned the whole story. When did the medical department of the school teach the imperial physician? How come he didn't know? Princess Chengyang took the letter and smiled. Sir, there are many things you don't know. Is it only the imperial physician who went to Li Garden? The music bureau sent people to collect folk songs, but only letters have been sent back in the past 5 years, but the people have never returned. I heard that the music bureau has requested Your Majesty to set up a Qingshan music bureau next to the Dayan Society for permanent residents. Liju was stunned, and then he was also convinced by this generation of ancient people. But no matter what, it is always a good thing that the technical station system can be forced to move forward by His Majesty the Emperor. Liju received the imperial edict and prepared in advance. The people selected from various places will not arrive until next year. The three backbones of the Chengyang Prefecture City Technical Station are expected to arrive by the end of the year. They are mainly teaching the experience of setting up and dealing with local government offices. The technical level will only slightly involve the transformation and expression of knowledge, and at most teach the experience of salt fields and drip irrigation technology. Calculating the time, there is still half a year to make room, and Liju slowly polishes the technology to be taught with peace of mind. The territory of Yaoniang is closer to the modern Qing Dynasty territory, but it is even larger. The north is really directly to the North Sea, that is Lake Baikal, and there are thousands of kilometers of forests that are all uninhabited areas. Beidou Hufu, Lingwei Road, and Marxi Road are all huge administrative regions with an area of millions of square kilometers. Dayang has 19 roads, including the important areas of the capital, with a total of 20 administrative divisions. Except for the rich areas of Jiangnan, the span of other administrative roads is very large. The internal environment of most administrative roads is already very different, and Li Ju does not know which county they will choose as the experimental point in the end. It was at this time that Li Ju sat down and carefully studied the political environment of the 19 provinces of Dayang. It can only be said that except for Jiangnan, Central Plains, and East and West Shandong, none of them are optimistic. Especially the three northernmost administrative provinces, because there is no way to invest in farming, except for the scattered areas near the south and the Basin Plain. Most of the uninhabited areas are in a completely deserted state. The court even exempted the border defense, and completely let the Sasha tribe, who were eyeing the neighboring covetously, go their own way. This situation will not improve until the emergence of railroads and internal combustion engines. After all, places that are too difficult to develop and have too low a return rate are naturally not valued. Once these places form stable settlements of non-central plains civilizations, it will be difficult to incorporate them into the territory after the concept of nation-states emerges. But it is not realistic to manage these places now. Dayang lacks money and people, and it does not have a high cold-resistant population. But Li Ju does not want to give up those vast uninhabited areas. In another 1,000 years, no, at most in 300 years, after he makes the steam engine, the importance of those places will suddenly rise. Not to mention the treasure trove of resources, it is also very meaningful as a strategic depth. Li Ju scratched the huge map and almost matched each place with modern geography. The geographical conditions, advantages, and disadvantages, and future development plans were clear at a glance. When he was planning, Chen Guiyang, the third prince, Sanjiu, Suziake and others followed him. The further they went, the more they found that Li Ju's knowledge reserve was unfathomable. Li Ju prepared a huge map made of mulberry paper. The content was the detailed geographical conditions of Dayang's 19 roads and surrounding states and tribes. The contour lines and hydrology were restored as much as possible. Weather, soil, hydrology, topography, vegetation, light. Li Ju listed all the conditions one by one, and different conditions corresponded to different colors. For example, the more dry the place, the redder the hydrological paper strips, and the more flooded the place, the bluer the hydrological paper strips. These strips were nailed to the mulberry paper with small round-headed needles, so that the characteristics of each place were very eye-catching. At a glance, the color layers were clear, and the natural environment of various places in Dayang was very obvious. In addition to natural conditions, Li Ju also secretly used the development trend that I think is more suitable as an excuse to mark the final development results of various places in the modern plain. The Guanzhang generation will actually turn to industry in the future. Who would have thought that the hinterland of Hanoi would be based on coal? The hinterland of the Central Plains is now an economic center and transportation hub, but the future development direction is light industry and agriculture. These are far beyond everyone's cognition. However, Li Ju himself knows that such an industrial structure is actually inseparable from the war turmoil in the late Qing dynasty and the modern plain. If there is a peaceful transition to modern society, the industrial layout may not be the same. However, since it can develop like this in the modern plain, it means that there must be natural conditions. Dayang's productivity is like this, and the development plan of a place is highly dependent on natural conditions. For example, the highly developed small commodity and small factory economy in the future world cannot be carried out in small cities in the south of the Yangtze River in the modern world. The reason is that the local population is too small, the environmental carrying capacity is too low, and the transportation relying on river transportation is inconvenient. The small grain output and high grain transportation costs directly lead to a shortage of labor. In places with insufficient labor, handicraft workshops are even problematic to start work. How can they develop? Therefore, Li Ju's long-term vision for these places was factory areas radiated by sea trade ports, but the short-term requirements were road construction and terraced fields. The final product was a planning map that was almost detailed to the county level. As long as the selected experimental site was confirmed, the established direction could be found immediately to lay out the technology tree. Chapter 377 Opening of Port. The places the third prince had been to covered half of Daeang, excluding uninhabited areas. He compared what he had seen with Li Ju's judgment one by one, and it turned out that Li Ju's observations were indeed correct. The third prince said, "No wonder everyone says Mr. Li is the most knowledgeable. I had doubts before. No matter how knowledgeable a person is, what he has learned and seen is just talk on paper. I have traveled a lot, but what I have seen is not as profound and comprehensive as what Mr. Li said. I'm completely convinced today." Chen Guiyang also felt proud. Really? Otherwise, how could he be Mr. Li, who repeatedly asks Your Majesty to make exceptions? Li Ju said, "I have only read a few more books than you. In terms of real knowledge and methods, I'm far behind you. It would be better for me to entrust a small technical station to the third prince than to let me manage it myself. Mr. thinks about everyone when he does things. It is difficult for me to think so much. I'm used to using my status to solve some problems. Although I have tried to restrain myself after meeting you, I don't know what will happen in the future. So I respect you even more. You can conquer people with force and power, but you don't use simple methods and patiently explain the truth to everyone. I think you are a saint." Before the third prince went to Ludong Road, he had used his connections and power to solve problems that he didn't like. After arriving in Ludong Road, the third prince slowly learned to restrain himself with Li Ju. He couldn't guarantee that his ambition wouldn't expand. Now he used his status to suppress good things, but in the future he might use his power for his own selfish desires. Li Ju felt that the third prince was a little strange, as if he had become more polite to him after arriving in Jinling. Generally speaking, most of these changes have reasons. Li Ju looked at him strangely. "If you have anything to ask of me, just tell me. As long as it's not a bad thing, I will help you in any way I can." The third prince choked for a moment, but Chen Guiyang smiled. He is just a child. What does he know? Most likely, he went to Qingshan and Jinling and saw with his own eyes that the industries under your name are thriving, and people are living and working in peace and contentment, which touched his heart. Among all the brothers and sisters, my third brother and I are the most similar, and we have similar ambitions. The master knows me, so he also knows my brother. Li Ju still felt strange, but he really couldn't think of what this little prince wanted. After Chen Guiyang interrupted again, he was too lazy to ask. He has now clearly listed the plans for the 19 provinces across the country. No matter who is picked, there will be a strategy to follow immediately. The 19 provinces, including Jiangxi province, are actually confused. For a while, he didn't know whether to choose a good one or a bad one. If he chose a difficult place, would the emperor hate him because of the poor results? If you choose a rich place, will you waste a good opportunity to make money and develop? Only Ludong and Hualien are different. Needless to say, Hualien and Dao, Li Ju has managed Qingshan City well. The entire Dasan County is very cooperative, and other places are also lying down, and choosing the best one is good for everyone. Ludong Dao already has Chengyang Prefecture, and it is easy to continue to let Chengyang Prefecture as an experimental site. Ludong Dao initially thought Li Ju was meddling, especially the matter of Yaoniang being an official. Ludong Dao was particularly disdainful, but he did not dare to oppose it openly. Fortunately, the governor of Donglei County subdued him with one move, and the girls behind him obediently accepted the imperial edict of the Lady of the Throne, and did not mention the matter of being an official again. Now that 3 people from Ludong Dao have been selected as role models for the world, and are going to be lecturers in Jinling, Ludong Dao feels proud. This is face. Some clever county governments, seeing the changes in Qingshan City and Chengyang Prefecture, took the initiative to stand up and express their willingness to be the experimental site. What if they can also double the commercial tax and double the grain? Wouldn't it be a huge profit? The slightly cautious and conservative places hope that they will not be noticed by the governor and will never be dragged to be the first to come forward. It is indeed good to be guided by Fengrang how to develop, but it is not too late to join when the mechanism is mature and everything is stable. What if Fengrang Hao's plan fails? In short, Liu is busy here, and other places are also talking about it. There is only one place in the world that is smiling and not affected at all. It is Dingbo Port in Huajia County. Among the entire maritime trade related construction, Dingbo Port's project is the most complicated, but it was completed first. Because Dingbo Port is a place with a maritime trade foundation. After so many years, although the facilities of the seaport are somewhat decayed, the foundation, technology, and experience are all there. It is always easier to repair it than to start from scratch. 2 years later, Dingbo Port was finally renovated and ready for use. Other supporting seaports and transportation routes can basically be completed one after another within the year. The only one that will be delayed until next year is the transfer center located in the coastal wasteland of Kingshan City, and the rail transit system connecting the two places will be later. Liu Zhang followed County Magistrate Zhai to attend the opening ceremony of the seaport. On that day, more than 200 merchant ships carrying local, other counties, and foreign merchants, guides, and sailors set sail. The painter who was invited to the cliff near Dingbo Port in advance to overlook the entire port merchant ship departure ceremony drew this scene and named it Dingbo Port Opening Port 10,000 boats competing for the current and presented it to His Majesty the Emperor for his viewing. Later, many imitations or paintings with the same theme circulated on the market. Princess Chengyang and Li Ju both got several from others. It must be said that the picture really looks exciting. It also made all the merchants who had the conditions to send goods to Dingbo Port excited. Going to sea is really a profitable business. It also caused the commercial tax of Huajia County to suddenly increase by dozens of times. County Magistrate Zhai also came up with a unique idea to set up a property tax and stamp duty. The prices of land, real estate, and shops have increased by more than 10 times in 2 years. The extra part must be taxed, and it must be sold at the maximum of 3. When renting land, real estate, and shops to foreign merchants or local shops, a lease contract must be signed, and this contract must be protected by the government. Taxes must be paid, and they cannot be paid according to the contract price, but must be paid according to the market price. Those landlords and merchants who bought the ports and the intersections of major traffic routes in advance were all taxed. These taxes are not lower than traditional commercial taxes. The addition of the two is enough to make Huajia County the leading commercial taxpayer this year. Liu Zhang bought land near the port early, and he was also taxed hard at this time, but he was willing to pay this tax. The more taxes he pays, the more he earns, and the taxes he pays will still be put into the basic government expenditures of Yu County in the end. Taxes have increased, local government performance looks good, and other expenditures can also be increased. Old Zhang wants to follow the example of Kingshan City and run the poor relief office and the clinic well. In addition to the increase in tax revenue, fiscal revenue, the second most important achievement of local officials is the increase in population. Generally, these two are contradictory to a certain extent, because in the past, an increase in tax revenue in a short period of time meant an increase in exploitation, and an increase in exploitation would definitely lead to a decrease in life expectancy and birth rate. It takes a long time to slowly manage the tax population cycle in a virtuous and mutually reinforcing way. Old Zhang is not young anymore, and he is determined to seize the family's voice. Of course, he doesn't have time to stay in one place for more than 10 years. Now, without increasing the tax rate, the tax revenue is rising exponentially, and he has enough resources to encourage childbirth and support the population. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378, Don't Set Flag Too Randomly. It was midsummer, when the summer monsoon was at its strongest. The entire southeast coast was basically southerly and northerly. It was very convenient to go to Yizhou and Yingzhou in the northeast. Most of the merchant ships that set sail this time were heading to the northeast. There were also caravans that were eager to go south to Java, Sindhu and other places, but they would not set off until 3 or 5 months later. Among Li Ju's old friends, the shopkeeper Laoliu used to do business in the north. After the sea trade was slightly opened in the past 2 years, he mainly did business in the northeast. This was the first time to go to sea after the large-scale lifting of the sea ban. Laoliu was worried and took 2 young masters from Yingzhou who were studying in Dayang to board the ship and go north. Before leaving, Laoliu specially visited Li Ju. He is now doing a huge business and has become an important figure in the entire Jiangnan sea trade and livestock business. If he had to take other brothers with him to make a fortune this time, he would not be too lazy to go so far. At most, he would wait in Liaodong. When Laoliu came, he brought his wife, Ning, with him, and he also wanted to entrust Ning to Zhao Sanjiu's care. The main reason was that there were no female households in Qingshan City that were in charge of their own affairs. The few families that had good relations were all in their prime, and Laoliu was also afraid that Li Ju would become estranged from him after he went to Qingshan, so he brought his wife to Jinling. After I come back this time, if everything goes well, I might settle down in Jinling, and then I will still be neighbors with Madame Zhao. Sanjiu now lives in a separate cross courtyard in the front yard of the Marquis's mansion. He has vacated an east wing, a near room, and a porch, and let Ning move in with 2 servants. Sanjiu is mainly responsible for managing the property, and he has an official position, so it doesn't seem to be impolite for him to come out and interact with Laoliu. Sanjiu smiled and said, "That's great." Next to the Marquis's mansion is the princess's villa, which of course she can't live there. On the other side is the retired husband's quiet garden. The backyard is the master's school and experimental field. Further out is a gathering place for local nobles and relatives. It's quiet and harmonious. It would be best to set up business there. If you to really have this idea, you might as well ask. Shopkeeper Liu looked at Ning and said, "These matters are all decided by my wife, so please let her take care of it. I'll go to see the Marquis first. This trip will take half a year, maybe a year, and I have to set up a business firmly." Shopkeeper Liu came to Li Ju with a customs declaration form of him and the foreign caravan and proposed to open 2 shops firmly in Yizhou and Yingzhou. It wasn't a sudden idea for him. When he was doing horse farm and fur business outside the pass, Shopkeeper Liu also directly fenced off a piece of land in the city where herdsmen gathered and completely integrated into the lives of the locals. It is good to blend in. It is not easy to be cheated, and there are many conveniences. In the past 2 years, the shopkeeper Liu has found that the business outside is very good, so he thought about doing something like this. Shopkeeper Liu is a typical northern hero, and his skills are only inferior to Li Ju, who has systematic training experience. At that time, people were generally short, and the shopkeeper Liu could beat 10 foreigners. The local culture determined that they were very accepting and obedient to the people of the Central Plains. The people of Yingzhou and Yuzhou are not very different from the foreigners outside the pass. They accepted the civilization of the Central Plains as early as the Han and Tang dynasties. The Confucian doctrine combined with their national characteristics formed a new culture that is very Confucian on the surface and very unique on the inside. However, they are currently very admired by the Central Plains dynasty. Since Li Ju recruited foreign students and assistants every year and every month, a large number of people who admire Dayang, or people who have no choice but to sneak to Dayang in their local area, have come thousands of miles to the south of the Yangtze River. It is said that their shipbuilding technology is not very developed, especially the shipbuilding technology for long distance voyages is very backward, so 5 out of 10 ships will be swallowed up by the vast ocean. But they still came. Some people integrated into the society of Dayang and even forgot their family names and hometowns. Some people still wanted to go back. They wanted to bring the advanced culture of the Central Plains back to their hometowns. Li Ju had seen in advance that the books they wanted to bring back were mainly Confucian classics, poems, lyrics, and fu. In addition to the 4 books and 5 classics and various commentaries, Li Ju's Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Li's Journey to the West, Song Guozhi, Lantern Festival poems, and 3 Words and 2 Shots were all on their eager list. In particular, Huang Gong's commentary on Li's Romance of the Three Kingdoms has been published in Jiangnan to the 8th edition. This time, the people of Yu Yaoniang directly bought the 9th edition, carrying a total of 200 sets of 4-color hardcover and 800 sets of paperback. Li Ju looked at the list sent by the shopkeeper Liu and silently sighed that the Three Kingdoms complex of 20th people would not change in another world. In addition to Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West is the largest, with about 600 sets. There are also 100 or 200 other books. It can be said that books are the most among the things brought back by foreigners. Li Ju took a look and found that they did not bring back technical books such as the 100 Schools of Thought. As for other books, it did not matter. Among these foreigners who brought books back, there were also students from the Imperial College. It was normal for them to want to bring back more righteous books. It was not that they were stopped from climbing the technology tree, but they could only learn in Yaoniang. It was best to wait a few years before returning after finishing their studies. It was not that you were not allowed to develop the economy of your hometown, but before the boundaries and behavioral norms of the nation state were established, it was better for everyone to have less contact. Yaoniang was a traditional Central Plains civilization, and it lacked the motivation to expand and wage wars from the bottom of its heart. It was different in other places, and Li Ju did not want to make too many comments on this. In addition to books, there were also precious dyes, raw silk, cloth, porcelain, tea and other traditional trade items. Li Ju even saw apple tree seedlings and seeds. If you think about it carefully, there is little land there, and it is easy to freeze. In the future, the fruits in Yu Yaoniang will be very expensive. In ancient times, there were even more expensive ones. So Li Ju let the apple seedlings go, and Li Ju hoped that they would cultivate carefully and come up with some new varieties as soon as possible. In addition, there were a small number of things that were extremely difficult to transport, such as the lion cats and lion dogs raised by the nobles in Beijing, such as the beautiful goldfish cultivated in Luxi Road and Huobi Road, such as the various camellias and peonies cultivated in Ludang Road and Guanan Road. Finally, there were a few craftsmen hired at high prices, but they were artistic craftsmen mainly engaged in embroidery, carving, and gold and silver work. Among them, there were 3 monks and their apprentices who went to the east to preach this time. These are also common sense. Going back 100 years, the Tang dynasty exported these things to Japan. Li Ju returned the form to the shopkeeper Liu. Thank you for your trouble. You must take care and stay safe on this journey. Hey, what's the trouble? I'll do my job, Your Majesty, rest assured. I will not let them take anything they shouldn't take. Shopkeeper Liu put away the customs declaration form and said carelessly, I will let you know that I'm safe at this time next year. I will come back to accompany my wife in her old age. I have given up all these years. No children means no children, and we can live a good life as a couple. I can't let Anning grow old alone. Once things are settled over there, I will never. Chapter 379. The journey has just begun. As we all know, the biggest flag is I will 20th when I come back, and usually this person will not come back. Li Ju is not a superstitious person, but he also subconsciously said something superstitious. Let's not talk about this. You go and come back quickly. As long as we are better than them, things over there will be easier to do. You should take a look at the changes in their gold prices. In the past 2 years, you and Lao Chen have made a lot of money from the difference between gold and silver. I wonder if it has changed now? I remember it. Since the second half of last year, the gold price in Yingzhou has skyrocketed by 3 times. I sold some more, and I didn't lose money. I even made money. This time, no matter whether gold or silver rises, I'm determined to make 40% of it back. Shopkeeper Liu is indeed a chosen financial speculator. Li Ju thought that when the economy of various places picks up, it would be better for shopkeeper Liu to systematically learn financial and monetary knowledge, and then support this area, to prevent inflation and other things from happening. Making money is one thing, and observing more is another. In the future, maybe I will need your experience to do something big. In addition, remember to help me collect some seeds. Also, let someone we trust see if we can go from the north to the continent across the ocean via Chuzhou Island and Chuzhou Strait. If anyone is willing to go, we will give money and supplies. Li Ju was referring to the long journey planned from the Chukotka Peninsula through the Bering Strait to Alaska, and then to North America and South America. He had prepared a fuzzy map and gave it to the shopkeeper Liu. The reason for not giving a detailed map is that the detailed geography of Daeang in this era is not consistent with the future. Giving too much detail may be misleading. It is better to give a rough map and let them explore the rest by themselves. It is better to be slow than blindly confident. The continent across the ocean is the American continent. The entire outline and size are all given. Li Ju also kindly marked the origins and basic terrain of some crops. Shopkeeper Liu is an adventurer and explorer, and he has the potential to yearn for the journey in his bones, so Li Ju dared to give this to him. If he gave this map to Suzuki and Fuzaogi, I'm afraid that their first reaction would be to reflect on how they offended Li Ju and were sent to exile. Shopkeeper Liu took the map, and his heart trembled. How does the Marquis know so much? The elders in my family have been there and recorded some local customs. These places are inhabited by people who look similar to us, but the culture and language are very different. My elders guess. Li Ju paused and threw out a deceptive excuse. My elders guess that they are most likely the descendants of Zufu who sailed east. They have forgotten the culture of their ancestors and have become what they are now, which seems to be similar to the Qin dynasty, and the population is very small. If we can find them, wouldn't it be a good thing to accumulate virtue? Li Ju only said it was a guess, but he didn't say it was true. Shopkeeper Liu really believed it. So, they are the descendants of our ancestors? We need to look carefully. I don't need to do that. I will go back and take care of the affairs of Yingzhou first, and then go here to see it for myself. Shopkeeper Liu pointed to the sharp corner of land west of the Bering Strait, which was marked by Li Ju as Arctic Chuzha Island, which is the Chukchi Peninsula in the modern plain. He stretched out his hand as a palm, first measured the scale, and then gestured on the map, and couldn't help but exclaimed. According to the map of the Marquis, it takes thousands of miles to go from Yingzhou to Chuzha Island, whether by water or land. I have an old place outside the Great Wall on land, which is actually closer, but there may not be a road on land. If you have to cross mountains and ridges, it is hard to say how long it will take. The land route is 6,000 miles, and the sea route is 8,000 miles. I have to see for myself which route to choose. This sea is located in the extreme north. There should be floating ice in winter, which may avoid the risk of crossing the sea, but you have to brave the extremely cold weather. You have to think about which season to go there. After crossing the sea, the total length of the continent on the opposite side is. It should be 30,000 miles, right? The upper half is 15,000 miles, and the lower half is 15,000 miles. Coincidentally, it is really divided in half. The more the shopkeeper Liu gestured, the more shocked he became. The entire country of Daeang is only 15,000 miles from the southernmost to the northernmost. Is such a large piece of land on the opposite side still only at the level of civilization of the Qin dynasty? If he won the first place in such a big place, Li Ju would be crowned as a king, and he would at least be crowned as a marquis. In the history books of his future, it must be recorded that he, the shopkeeper Liu, whose full name was Liu Quanfa, had found the people of the Central Plains who had been stranded outside since the Qin dynasty. Shopkeeper Liu's heart was suddenly burning. Li Ju said, actually, it would be best for me to go, but I can't leave for the time being. This time I hope you can explore the way first. If the records are true, I will pack up and prepare to go with you. My lord, this is a place where no one has ever walked for 30,000 miles. At the distance we have to go sideways and the 6,000 to 7,000 miles on our side, and there is at least 40,000 miles to go. It will be impossible to come back without 3 to 5 years. Li Ju smiled and said, I must be the one who is best for me to be where I'm now. Besides, aren't you being sent to find someone to inquire first, so as to prepare for what will happen in a few years? In case the news is wrong, we should try another way, as soon as possible. We have to go sooner or later for nothing else, but for our seeds and crops, and for the people we feed. Think about it, once the technical station is established, everyone will have more money and more people in the future. Each workshop will be able to produce dozens or hundreds of times more things, but they will no longer need so many people. Where should people go, and where should things go at that time? You are a talented person. Think carefully about this journey. Shopkeeper Yu Yaoniang took notes carefully, rolled up the map and miscellaneous books, and put them in his bag, and got Li Ju's promise to protect his family and property. He then said goodbye to the Marquis mansion with satisfaction and rode south. After he left, Yu Yaoniang and the third prince came together to ask him about the lifting of the sea ban. The impact of opening sea trade at this time was different from when Li Ju first proposed it. When Li Ju proposed opening sea trade, it happened that the granary in Jiangnan was empty, and it was a disaster year. He proposed this in order to collect grain from overseas. They all knew that Li Ju attached great importance to agriculture, grain, and animal husbandry. When he moved to Jinling and lived in the Marquis mansion, he did not forget to open an experimental field. Therefore, the sea trade that Li Ju supported was even more abrupt. Sea trade is a market created from overseas for Dayang. When the demand increases, the supply will of course be raised, and the increase in supply will inevitably compete for labor. Although the economy of Jiangnan is developing day by day, the price of grain is also getting higher day by day because the opportunity cost of labor is too high. Cotton, linen, peanuts and other crops compete with grain for land, water, and fertilizer. Only with the mandatory orders of the emperor in the capital can the lowest level of arable land investment be maintained. Even so, it is necessary to rely on the annual reliable drive of county officials and clerks in various places to actively urge people to grow grain, otherwise they will still dare to manage rice and cotton and peanuts. After the repair of the seaport began, the labor cost in Jiangnan became more and more expensive. Although there were a steady stream of disaster victims and refugees, they could not resist the huge gap here. It takes people to build seaports, build roads, build ships, sailors, attendants, various industries, and factories. With the skyrocketing labor costs, the price of labor-intensive grains could not be reduced at all. Li Ju emphasized agriculture and always suppressed the prices of the commodities of his own industry. Few of his industries were truly operating in the direction of making money. Generally, Li Ju would hand over anything he came up with to the joint venture for at most 1 year, and Li Ju himself rarely made money from reselling things. People value Li Ju, not because of his ability to make a fortune, but because of his skill in revitalizing an industry, his kindness towards the poor, and his family fortune that had been accumulated over dozens of generations. Chapter 380. We all have a bright future. Outsiders have always believed that, even if Li Ju did not discriminate against business, he at least did not like doing business. Previously, Li Ju took the initiative to write a letter to suggest lifting the ban on sea trade, which was basically understood by people as the purpose of finding seeds, plants, and technology. However, after the ban on sea trade was really lifted this year, after carefully checking the customs declarations, especially those from Qingshan and Jinling, it seemed that this was not the case. All that was sent out were goods, and only a small amount of seeds and grains were taken back, and most of the others were spices, jewelry, gold and silver. Yu Yaoniang and the third prince looked at it strangely, so they came to ask. Li Ju did not deny it. Of course we collect grain in years of famine and disaster, and it is normal to export some local superior products on normal days. If I hadn't used grain as an excuse, would your majesty agree? Then again, we shouldn't collect grain in years of bumper harvests in Dayang, otherwise the return of grain from sea trade will definitely impact grain prices. Unless there is a gap. The third prince didn't understand and asked, in this case, the increasingly profitable sea trade will inevitably stimulate people to invest in traveling merchants and workshops. What about the fields? Development problems can only be solved by development. We can't let everyone earn less money because of insufficient people and resources. Water conservancy, fertilizers, greenhouses, and seeds must keep up with the pace of commercial development. Speaking of which, I do have rice seeds that yield more than 1000 kilograms per mu, but the trial results were extremely unsatisfactory. It should be because the water, fertilizer, and heat can't keep up. I took great pains to set up the technical station in the school. Isn't it just to solve the problems brought about by development? Li Ju began to draw a relationship diagram on the whiteboard. The origin of all of them is agriculture, commerce, including industry, that competes with agriculture for all resources, animal husbandry that partially competes with agriculture for resources, but can effectively supplement it, and taxes that override everything. Commercial activities directly promote the technology that Li Ju has always emphasized, and taxes provide guarantees and support for all these activities. The resources flowing in each link include people, land, livestock, etc. This picture is not only Li Ju's own experience, but also the insights provided by Liu Zhang, San Jiu and even Xia Teixao. That's probably the situation. On the surface, commerce and industry are competing with agriculture. However, they provide more taxes and income for the people, which increases the income of the national treasury and the emperor's inner treasury, as well as the amount of resources circulating in the market. You have all taken my classes, and you should know that in a country, only resources that are used are resources, and only currency in circulation is money. If these increased income and resources can be invested in technological innovation, people's livelihood, and agricultural supplements, the initial competition contradictions will be greatly reduced. Especially technology, every innovation will make agriculture take a big step forward. The difference between the third prince, Chen Guiyang and other superior people is that they have really lived among the people. The third prince had a deep understanding of the lives of ordinary people in Guanzhong, Ludong, and Jiangnan. Chen Guiyang had a deep contact with ordinary people mainly during the time when he was an assistant teacher in the school in Qingshan City and when he traveled in Jingling. It is unlikely that she will really live in the countryside with 2 or 3 people like her brother, so she can only rely on communication to collect some information. Chen Guiyang was careful and had been more influenced by Li Ju. Although he had less personal experience, his knowledge was no less than that of his younger brother. After Li Ju finished drawing the picture and briefly explained his ideas, the two of them looked enlightened. Of course, we must not forget what Duke Huan of Qi and Guanzhong did. We must not be blinded by the quick money-making industry and commerce, and forget our roots. Food is the lifeline, and must be strictly controlled by the court. Without money, life will only be a little harder. Without food, people will lose their lives. When ordinary people face the threat of death, they never hesitate to rise up. The precedent Li Ju mentioned was that Guanzhong once bought machinery and cash crops/products from neighboring countries at high prices, which led to the slackness of agriculture in neighboring countries. The development of industry and commerce under a virtuous cycle can drive agriculture together, but human nature is not so easy to trust. The desire for profit can be used to force people to invest in technological innovation by taking advantage of their desire for wealth. However, once the desire for profit is out of control, big businessmen will dare to invest 120% of their resources in industry and commerce until a large number of people starve to death in the country, until the remaining population is barely large enough for businessmen to expand production and sales of products. Now that sea trade has been opened, people will only become more crazy. If there is no restriction, the final result will most likely be that the industries with regional advantages will be developed to the extreme, and the industries without regional advantages will be abandoned. Obviously, in Dayang now, the lowest productivity output is farming. Even cotton farming earns more than farming. If there is no restriction, agriculture will most likely be eliminated in the end. By then, Dayang's neck will be stuck by grain-producing countries. His Majesty the Emperor saw this point, so he repeatedly emphasized the protection of agriculture and sericulture in the past 2 years, and even changed the evaluation reference of Jiangnan officials. In the words of His Majesty the Emperor, with such a big Li Ju and such a big seaport, how can there be less money? In the future, all places in Jiangnan that participate in sea trade will first consider the annual grain harvest, second consider the population growth, and finally consider the tax revenue. The third prince looked at the whiteboard and then at Li Ju. Li Ju was open and honest and looked at it casually. Yes, he was using conspiracy to force His Majesty the Emperor to lean all kinds of policies towards the route he wanted. Now that the technical station is in place, technical officials are basically in place. With sea trade, those who get on the ship will not be able to get off the ship in the future. It is not up to His Majesty the Emperor to decide, but it is up to those who have tasted the sweetness. Li Ju's second point 5 goals are the academic system supporting the technical station. After this system is established, Li Ju will consider whether to use the dragon slaying technique that every Chinese in the 21st century will learn in junior high school according to the degree of technological development. Where will that set of explanations of productivity and production relations lead this country? Li Ju does not know. Master Yuan, where will we lead Yingzhao? The vast sea is deep and vast. The huge ship was as small as an ant in the boundless sea. The person who was asking the question was wearing a fresh green lotus robe. His Chinese name was Huang Jianli. He was originally a fisherman's son in Yingzhao. Because he couldn't survive, he tried to find a way out in the legendary Central Plains. There were 26 boats traveling together, with 30 to 40 people on each boat. In the end, only 4 people arrived at Dayang alive. He was the luckiest. Because he had a keen eye and was hardworking, he was selected by the Li Family Academy in Qingshan City in a few years. While studying, he worked as a guide in Yingzhao. Huang Jianli was the name given to him by the teacher Huang Zhi, and he chose his surname himself. He originally had no surname, only a nickname Ergal. He didn't tell Huang Zhi about this, and was secretly happy that he could get Huang Zhi's surname. The person being asked was much younger, wearing a bright red imperial robe, with vigorous vigor between his eyebrows, full of infinite yearning for the future. This man was a young nobleman sent from Yingzhao to study. He had no surname, but was given the surname Yuan, after he was separated, and became a branch. His Chinese name was Hangdao. Yuan Hangdao was a humble and polite person, unlike his relatives who were arrogant, so he could still say a few words to Huang Jianli, who was of humble origin. If it were a noble or upper class person from Yingzhao, he would probably have slapped him in the face. Yuan Hangdao completed 8 years of study in Chang'an, and stayed in Jinling for another 2 years, just to return to Yingzhao with the sea trade ship. It must be a brighter and better future, as prosperous as Chang'an, as romantic as Jinling, and as prosperous as Dingbo Port. Yuan Hangdao was nostalgic for everything in Dayang. Compared to Dayang, Yingzhao really seemed like a messy village. Everything will be fine. Mr. Liu promised that he would help us realize our wishes. Chapter 381 Noble and Humble. Huang Jianli also missed the elegance and wealth of Jiangnan. But he was more concerned about another thing. He studied in Liyuan, and what he learned and taught were the most practical things, unlike Yuan Hangdao, who learned the elegance of the upper class. The reason why Huang Jianli was confused about the future was that he found that he had learned some superficial things in Liyuan school, and he could not bring out a single word or a piece of paper from the relevant textbooks. However, those things were the most important. He wanted to understand the geographical and natural environment of Yingzhao, to study the mechanical skills of Liyuan, to sort out the connection between land, economy, market, and country. He only understood the superficial things, as if he had glimpsed a ladder to heaven, but was locked out by the gate. Things would not be so coincidental, just what he thought should be studied seriously was blocked. This must be intentional by the people of Dayang. But what is the point of the people of Dayang blocking the skills of lowly craftsmen and tenants? Could it be that for Dayang, these technologies are more important than the supreme Confucianism? After hearing Yuan Hangdao's words, Huang Jianli was somewhat skeptical of his blind confidence, and also somewhat skeptical of his own guesses. He half believed and half doubted. Master Yuan, do you think that the books that Yang Dynasty gave us to take back are the most precious documents? Of course. The Analects, Mencius, the Great Learning, and the Doctrine of the Mean are all such precious treasures. You won't understand. They teach us the principles of being a human being, and also teach the wisdom of the monarch to govern the world. Such precious knowledge, the people of Yang Dynasty are completely open to outsiders like us, which is really the magnanimity of a great country. Huang Jianli hesitated again and again, and still asked, but they have very good dyeing and weaving formulas, and weaving methods, that are thousands of times faster than hand cranking and hand weaving, and many methods, that can make more crops grow in the fields, but they don't teach us to take back. Yuan Hangdao shook his hand indifferently. Isn't it enough to buy cloth from Dayang? This is nothing, only the common people care about these. As he said, Yuan Hangdao still slightly disliked Huang Jianli. Facing such a sea sky scenery, one should at least recite the chapters of Spring River Tide connects to the sea level, the moon rising in the great river, the movement of the sun and the moon, as if from the middle, play the songs of flowing water and 100 rivers, dance the dances of Fubo, Taiyin and Changking, and discuss the doctrine of 100 rivers flow east to the sea and the mountain never gets tired of being high, and the sea never gets tired of being deep. This is the correct way. Listen to what this pariah is talking about. Craftsman? Farming? Isn't this nonsense? The despised Yu Yaoniang was not completely unaware, but at this time he couldn't care too much. Anyway, Yu Yaoniang didn't say it directly. He still felt that something was wrong, but he was used to being obedient, so he didn't continue to dwell on this topic. In front of a noble son like Yu Yaoniang, he was nothing. People had their own thoughts, and the ships carrying people rose, and fell in the waves, and sailed towards each other's shore. After the shopkeeper Eliu and some other cautious or other businesses set off, the busyness of the seaport decreased slightly, and then it remained at a relatively average level. It was August, the weather had turned cooler, and people were busy preparing for the Mid-Autumn Festival reunion. Fu Xiaoguya brought his wife Yue to Jinling. Their eldest son had just turned 2 months old, and they couldn't wait to return to Jinling. Fu's father and mother, their daughter, and the adopted Xiaoguya were also brought along. Fu's father and mother are now mainly in the livestock industry. One is focused on slaughtering pigs, and the other is mainly engaged in the chicken and duck business. Xiaoguya is still timid and unwilling to speak, but Fu's father and mother found that she has an extremely extraordinary strength, which is her extreme sensitivity to temperature. This talent may not seem very impressive, but it is extremely useful when hatching chickens and ducks and testing the furnace temperature. Xiaoguya is now mainly helping Fu's mother to simmer the chickens and ducks. The chickens and ducks she simmers are always kept until the last moment, and they will suffocate if they are a little bit overheated. In this way, when fully grown, chickens and ducks are big and strong, and not prone to disease. Li Ju's thermometer-controlled water tank incubation method cannot achieve this effect at all. Fortunately, Li Ju's extensive method is mostly used to deal with fast-growing chickens such as white-feathered chickens, and those chickens do not need to grow up. After the Fu family arrived in Jinling, Fu's father and mother, Fu Xiaomi and Xiaoguya lived in 2 buildings in the backyard of the Marquis's mansion. After wandering here for a while, they will move to the technical station and continue to concentrate on the breeding and reproduction of livestock and poultry. Fu Xiaoguya's family of 3 was taken in by the Yu family. The carriage sent by Eugene was waiting at the edge of the Marquis's mansion. Fu Xiaoguya and his wife met Master Li Ju, and before they had a bite of food, they were taken away by Eugene and his wife who had been waiting for a long time. It is completely understandable that Yue has never been away from home for more than a year at this age. This time she went to get married and have a baby. It was not easy to return to Jinling. Naturally, her parents were eager to get along well with their daughter. Fu Xiaoguya came to Jinling this time not to be Li Ju's agent, but for the imperial examination. Fu Xiaoguya had studied in Qingshan City for 2 years. This year, Huang Zhi and Yu Fu both said that he could try the provincial examination, that is, the examination for the title of Juren. Considering that it was time for his grandparents to see their grandson, Fu Xiaoguya discussed with Li Ju and brought his family to Jinling. Li Ju was really disappointed to hear that his little apprentice grandson was not a girl but a boy. Fu Xiaoguya was also very disappointed. He had no idea of passing on his family line. His current father was not his biological father, and the Fu family in that village did not seem to have any good genes worth passing on. Fu Niang didn't care even more. Yue was the hope of life, a new beginning, and the best of everything for Fu Xiaoguya. Therefore, Fu Xiaoguya always hoped to have a daughter as beautiful and gentle as Yue. However, after having the first child, Fu Xiaoguya didn't really want Yue to have another child. Even with medical students guarding Yue, childbirth is still very dangerous. There are 10 months of difficult pregnancy before childbirth, and several months after childbirth, when you cannot live a normal life. Breastfeeding is also a burden for the mother. What if the child dies? Then just take in a few apprentices to take care of him in his old age. Anyway, the apprentice who has formerly worshipped the master must once a teacher, always a father. Fu Xiaoge originally wanted to ask Li Ju if there was any way to prevent pregnancy, but this topic was not easy to talk about in public. Before he could find a chance to talk to Li Ju in private, he was hurriedly stuffed into the carriage by Yujin and his wife. Yujin originally wanted to invite Fu's parents and 2 younger sisters to live in Yu's house, but Fu's father and mother considered that they still had tasks and could not afford to delay, so they resolutely refused to go. Yujin saw that they were not hypocritical or forced, but really had something to do, so he gave up. They left the address of the Yu family and told the concierge that if Fuji Yui's parents or sister came to visit, they should be invited indirectly. Then they left with their daughter and son-in-law. Chapter 382. Marry the right person. The Fu family is a kind and honest family. Father and mother Fu would never bully their daughter-in-law by relying on their status. The 2 younger sisters are young and gentle, and the sisters-in-law are harmonious. Fu Gaia is even more so. She loves Yuai like a treasure, and only likes her more. She has never been impatient. The 2 have never had a quarrel since they got married. Mrs. Yu and her daughter carefully talked for a night, and were sure that her daughter's life after marriage was no different from when she was at home, and even Fu Gaia was exactly the same as Li Ju in terms of indulgence. Neither of them liked to tie people down at home. Yuai could go wherever she wanted, and do whatever she wanted. She was freer than when she was a girl at home. The mother and daughter chatted for a day, but Mrs. Yu felt unhappy. Why did she think her daughter's husband's family was better than her own family? Yujin is quite good. He manages the household well. There is no internal fighting at home, and there is no mess outside. But compared with Fu Gaia's consideration and indulgence, he is much worse. Yujin himself is like that, and he also requires his wife to be virtuous. When Yuai was at home, Yujin was also very strict with her. But when he heard that his son-in-law was so spoiled with his daughter, which violated the rules that Yujin had always followed, he was very happy with it. Yujin said with emotion, "That year, I could see that Fu Gia was not upright and was calculating. I had no choice but to marry my daughter to him due to the situation and the guarantee of Lord Li. I didn't expect that he would choose the most suitable one. A family like us doesn't expect our son-in-law to be a marquis or a prime minister, nor do we expect our children to be rich and powerful. We just hope that the person we trust will not let us down." Fuji Ui is a good person. The friends that Madame Yu often interacted with always talked about those old stories in a vague way, such as the man bullying his daughter-in-law and his wife's family after he got the upper hand, and the parents-in-law deliberately bullying their daughter-in-law by taking advantage of the rules just to deliberately disgust Madame Yu. Madame Yu said on the surface, it must be more than that, but in fact, she believed it a little over time. At this time, she believed that whether a person is good or bad is not very related to innate conditions such as family and background, but is more closely related to the person's nature. Fuji Ui had to take exams when he came to Jinling. Yujin asked him to write a few essays. As expected, they were solid, safe, and well regulated, and they were completely different from when they just got married. Yujin liked this son-in-law more and more, so he reported to Mr. Yu and opened a study room for Fuji Ui to study. After Fuji Ui got married, he relied on Huang Zhi and Yu Fu for his studies. Yu Fu was an honest man without any tricks, and Yujin naturally knew this. It was said that Huang Zhi was also a noble man. He even gave up the exam because he saw the inhumane behavior of local officials. He guessed that Huang Zhi would not take shortcuts, so Yujin invited Mr. Yu's staff to be his teacher, to teach Fuji Ui some exam skills. Fuji Ui made progress in his studies, but he only heard some hearsay about the details of the exam, and didn't know much about it. He got this teacher to explain the format, taboos, and the examiner's preferences. It was as if he had met a pillow when he was sleeping, and he was more focused on preparing for the exam. Fu Gia was absorbed in studying and seldom went out, but Yuai often went out. However, when Yuai went out, her status changed from the daughter of Mr. Yu to the wife of the Fu family. Fu Gia had not passed the imperial examination, so if you compare carefully, Yuai was just the wife of a scholar. Even though this scholar was a disciple of Marquis Feng Rang, he did not have an official position, and Yuai did not have an imperial decree, so their status was somewhat different for a while. Yuai herself did not take it to heart, thinking it was just some rumors, which could not affect her love and respect for Fuji Yuai. The most incredible thing is that the fourth sister of the Yu family married a scholar from a poor family, right? How pitiful. I don't know when the fourth sister can earn an imperial edict. Yuai replied, people in the Lingayan pavilion can earn imperial edicts for their wives. If Sister Ling likes imperial edicts, she might as well go to the Lingayan pavilion to hold a tablet. That is a super great position, isn't it better than some Anran Ruran? Ling, who had just obtained the 6th grade Anran imperial edict this year as her husband was promoted, turned pale and stopped talking. I heard that families in small and medium-sized households can't even afford to hire a few maids. Those who are even worse off have to do their own laundry and cooking. Fourth sister, when you were in the boudoir, your hands were the most delicate and tender, so you must take good care of them. My husband just got a box of imperial pearl oil, which is fragrant and smooth, and most suitable for moisturizing the skin. Why don't I give it to you, sister? Yuai stretched out her still fair and delicate hand and said, Sister Zhang, keep it for your good sisters. I'm sure young Master Wan will be happier to see your sisterly love. I can't use it. When I was at home, neither Fulang nor my parents-in-law asked me to serve tea or water. The stunning bun I combed today was done by Fulang himself. He was clumsy and didn't comb it well, so I'm sorry to embarrass you sisters. That was indeed not very good. Fugia didn't even know how to use hair oil, and her bun was frizzy. But it was proof of the love between husband and wife. Zhang, who was heartbroken and worried about her husband's lust for women and the many concubines at home, was speechless. Alas, this family has no money. If I want to be in love with my husband, I can only enjoy the fun of the poor, such as gambling on books, pouring tea, drawing eyebrows, and tying hair. I get bored after playing too much. I'm idle this year and have nothing new to do. My husband has bought a troupe of actors and put them in the newly purchased villa. Every year, he has to learn some new plays from outside to entertain me. That's right. Look, I just said that blue is popular this year, and Fulang found me such a big sapphire, a whole box. I made a necklace of 180 beads and a bracelet of 49 beads, which is more than enough. Fulang also asked me to add a few more. When I touched them, they were already heavy, and I was exhausted. I kept the rest as marbles, but it was not interesting. They were not as good as the box of glass marbles before. After all, these gems and beeswax are not round enough. Yuai fiddled with the bracelet made of 5 circles of 6-pointed sapphires as big as a pigeon egg that Fugai had obtained through maritime trade. The beautiful 6-pointed sapphires shone like a dream, and against the light yellow shirt she was wearing today, it looked very delicate. The lady, who was wearing a quail egg-sized sapphire hairpin on her head and trying to show off, did not speak. Yuai found it boring, and it would be better for her to stay at home and study with Fugaya. Fugaya, like Yujin, felt that girls should read more books. In the past, Fugaya even forced his own mother to study at home. These days, Fuji Yuai followed his staff to study for the exams, and it was not convenient for Yuai to accompany him, so she separated a small hall from the side and read some obscure books that Fuji Yuai had collected from outside. I heard that your mother-in-law was not a virtuous woman when she was young, and many people had ties with her. You should be careful too. Ah. Why are you hitting people? Hearing that the topic involved her poor mother-in-law, Yuai slapped her twice without any hesitation, making her dizzy. Mother-in-law is like mother, and daughter-in-law should be filial to her. How can a daughter listen to others framing her mother and not fight back? What kind of person is that? You said it, and I will hit you. If you say one more word, I dare to hit you again. The maids with Yuai were all strong women carefully selected by Fuji Yuai. They were not good looking, but they were as strong as bulls. Seeing this, they rushed forward and separated the woman who wanted to fight back and the maid from a distance. Everyone hurriedly persuaded the two to leave and sent the one who was beaten to comb her hair, wash her face, and change clothes. After that, she became much more obedient and did not dare to try to provoke Yuai again. I never expected that Yuai's temper would become even worse after she got married. You can imagine how she was spoiled at home. Alas, how could he spoil his wife like this? I wonder if Mr. Fu, who indulges his wife like this, has any unmarried brothers? Chapter 383 Reunion. Princess Chengayang seldom walks around Jinling, but the news that Yuai taught a lesson to someone who verbally insulted her mother-in-law was still spread to Chengayang. Chengayang probably knew that Fu Niang had a very miserable past. Yuai could defend Fu Niang's reputation outside, deter rumors, and slap her directly when her bottom line was touched. He was really a tough guy. Princess Chengayang would inevitably take care of Yuai more. Anyway, the two families were not far away, and Princess Chengayang and the second wife of the Yu family were still in frequent contact. Princess Chengayang came forward to defend Yuai, and everyone had nothing to say. There were many gatherings in Jinling City, and Yuai had to patiently attend several of them. In the end, because of the kindness of her parents-in-law, Fu Gai's loyalty, Li Ju's wealth and generosity to his apprentice, and Princess Chengayang's protection, she successfully turned the tables, and continued to be the lucky girl who was envied by others in Jinling City. After Yuai returned to her status as a pearl in the social circle, she had to listen to some other things. The hottest topics in the boudoir social circle this year are going to sea and the marriage of Marquis Feng Rang. The former is related to everyone's living standards, and even the dowry of oneself, daughters, and sisters. The latter has always been the center of gossip, and people always pay special attention to marriage. The topic of the technical station, which is more vital in the outside world, is not very popular in the boudoir. There are a few girls who are interested, but they can't find anyone to discuss with, so they gradually stop talking about it. People always make friends with people with similar interests. Girls who are interested in the technical station and the school gradually gathered in the small circle of Chengayang and Sanjiu. It's not that others don't want to squeeze in, but they really can't squeeze in. When Princess Chengayang and Sanjiu were discussing the power principle of the steam engine, the girls who were interested could interrupt, and the girls who were not interested in the steam engine, but interested in other industries could ask if their industry could be combined, and the others could only laugh awkwardly. Such a chat is very painful, and even if you bite the bullet and squeeze in, it doesn't make much sense. Socializing is to bring the two sides closer. If you don't have much to say, it's good enough. If you don't alienate each other, how can you bring them closer? They really don't understand. Isn't it good to chat about gossip, food, clothing, housing and transportation? Why do you have to take physics classes in social occasions? Chengayang built a mechanical assembly and maintenance factory, or station, next to Yaochen Temple. The girls in their small circle like to choose this factory or Chengayang's courtyard as the place for gathering. Their imagination is still relatively immature. They imagine that the technical station is like a school, where the teacher teaches on the top and the students listen below. After a few years, the students learn and become new teachers. Not only them, but all those who have not really participated in the construction of the technical station regard the technical station as a school. Until a few people who hurriedly came from Chengayang Prefecture arrived. The people sent by the Chengayang Prefecture Fucheng Technical Station were Meng Erlang, Yu Yaoniang and Li Yuan. They also took the excuse that they were short of manpower and needed assistance, and brought the young wife Lian He who was guarding the door at Xiaoshan and the Sold Field. They came to teach the technical station's employment system and localization experience, and each of them had their own unique insights. The 5 of them were escorted to Jinling by the Yamen runners sent by Chengayang Prefecture, and the Jinling prefect came forward to settle them. After a short rest, they came to Fengrang Marquis's mansion to ask for an audience. The 5 of them, except Xiaoshan, have lost some weight. Xiaoshan's family is not well off, and he has been able to eat 3 meals a day at the technical station, so he has grown stronger. The other 4 people had a good life to begin with, and they were really tired from running around every day at the technical station, so they all lost weight. But their spirits are better. The 5 were invited to Li Ju's experimental field. Jiangnan has entered the second round of farming, and the fields have long been filled with intercropped crops, and are full of vitality again. Li Ju, the mute, and the third prince wore straw hats and brown summer cloth, and sat side by side at the edge of the field to rest. Chen Guiyang, wearing men's clothes, and several other peasant women pushed a bucket of weed shoveled from the field to the pigsty and chicken coop. Sanjiu was not there. Sanjiu was dealing with miscellaneous chores and other business matters. Sanjiu and Suzy K worked hard to do odd jobs, so that Li Ju could freely wander in the ocean of science. Meng Erlang and others had seen how Li Ju personally participated in the labor, so they didn't find it strange. The local official in Jinling who led them to find Li Ju was really scared. However, he hesitated again and again, and finally did not ask, but introduced them in accordance with the rules, and then left tactfully. Li Ju didn't know that they had arrived early, and he and the mute and the third prince hurriedly welcomed the 5 people to the small building on the side, and then ordered someone to notify the princess, and everyone changed their clothes to meet the guests. Big Brother Li, young master and Ada. As soon as the outsiders left, Meng Erlang, Yu Yaoniang and other slightly more lively and familiar people came up to call them by their private names. But, everyone is good. Come on, sit down. The mute helped Li Ju pour the tea and took out a box to put it. Li Ju asked everyone to sit down. Seeing that they were all very restrained, he gave each of them a fruit and then asked about their well-being. You have worked hard on the way. Did you have any discomfort in Jinling? Is everything going well in Ludong? Are the county governor Kang and others alright? Meng Erlang was active and polite. He had to represent the technical station to deal with the masters at the top. After this year, he was vaguely the head of the technical station. Therefore, he answered first, "Thank you for your concern, big brother. Everything is fine over there. It's just that Yaoniang. Alas, I didn't save her." Seeing Ensign was also there, Meng Erlang guessed that Li Ju should have known the specific things, so he didn't elaborate. Li Yuan and Zhao Shan, who were more familiar with Yaoniang, also sighed, not to mention the third prince, whose face turned green. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little stiff, and it was Lion He who finally broke the silence. It's not a vain sacrifice. After Sister Yaoniang left, our lives became better. They no longer dared to force us too much. Li Ju didn't say anything, and the third prince said, that shouldn't have happened. I watched and protected it, but there were still such tragedies, and I couldn't find any fault. Tell me, how many more tragic things happened in places we can't see and control? Others didn't know the identity of the third prince, but they vaguely felt that his tone of voice didn't sound like an ordinary rich young master. Thinking of this, the behavior of young Master Ensign in Chengyang Prefecture was also a little strange. He was a Chang'an native. Why did he come all the way to Chengyang Prefecture? He didn't set up any industry, nor did he participate in business, but instead he hung out with the technical station for nearly a year. Li Ju said, that's exactly what I'm worried about. How can we manage the 19 provinces and 120 states under heaven? That's why I must make the technical station system independent of the existing bureaucracy and school system. Your Majesty is also worried about this. It's easy to set up a technical station for learning and teaching, but it's not as simple as a small-scale operation in Chengyang Prefecture to make the technical station develop normally. But I think we can build the technical station while thinking about improving the system. Your Majesty is worried that one move will affect the whole body and the impact will be too great, so he prefers to think everything through before taking action. Chapter 384 Genius. Involving a complete system is a relatively profound issue, which requires the Emperor, Li Ju, and the third prince to consider. Meng Erlang and others are limited by their cognition and cannot help for the time being. There are indeed people in this world who are born smart and can see the laws of how things work, but they are too rare. Most people can only learn a little. However, it is not completely impossible. Did Dalong really make up his mind to try this technical station himself? The person asking the question was the great scholar Yang Mengson in the capital. He and Teifu Yang did not have the same ancestor. There were 2 Yangs, one in the south and one in the north. He was a Yang in the south, and his blood relationship with the royal family was closer. Princess Chengyang often pretended to be Yang Mengson's disciple when she was traveling outside. Yang Mengson knew it and accepted it. The person Yang Mengson was talking to here was his eldest grandson, the fiancé of the 5th lady of the Yaonan family. Although it was just a joke by the emperor and no one took it seriously, the 2 little ones were childhood sweethearts. and had deep feelings for each other, so the two families went with the flow and decided on the marriage of the two little ones. 2 years ago, because of a plot by the Spurs, the fifth daughter of the Yu family went to Beijing to live and was raised by the Yang family. This time, when the emperor ordered the 19 provinces and the capital to select a county/prefecture/state to participate in the construction of the technical station system, Yang Dalang, who had just turned 16, took the initiative to stand up and ask to go. Yang Mengxin and Yang Jingwei knew the son very well, and of course they knew that his purpose of asking to go as a specially selected official of the Yinzhou technical station in the capital was to have a careful academic discussion with Li Ju. They felt that it was a bit unworthy. Once they entered the technical station system and received a real job, it would be difficult to return to the right path of the imperial examination in the future. It is easy to pass the examination for a scholar or a juren, and it is not even difficult to pass the jinshi, but the symbol of faction will never disappear, and it will even affect his descendants. Yang Dalang had no expression on his face. He had always been like this. Yes. Grandfather, Lord Fengrang House theory is worth exploring in depth. I should go and ask for his advice in detail. Okay, then I won't stop you. Send someone to pack your things and bring your guards. You should also take the girl from the Yu family. I heard that old man Yu was not feeling well at the end of last year, but he was fine in the spring, so there should be no problem for her to get through this year. But it's hard to say about next year or the year after. You should take the girl to see her grandfather. Yang Dalang bowed deeply to his grandfather and then looked at his father. Yang Jingwei was the chief academic officer of the Imperial College, and he would be more inclined to Zheng Deru and others emotionally. He knew that Li Ju's heresy was not an illusory conjecture, but a down-to-earth academic opinion with real evidence, and he was still not willing to accept it emotionally. My son, if you are only interested in Li's theory, why don't you wait until His Majesty invites Marquis Fengrang to Beijing to discuss it with him? Even if you are in a hurry, you can still exchange letters. There is nothing wrong with that. The words in the letter can be kept for a long time and carefully pondered. Isn't it better than going alone thousands of miles away? Yang Dalang shook his head. What you learn from books is always shallow, and you must practice it yourself to know it. Father's heart is no longer in the middle, and you still need to be impartial in studying. Yang Dalang also bowed to his father for a long time, and his face still had no expression. It seems that he has nothing in his mind except the word learning. After saying goodbye to his grandfather and father, Yang Dalang returned to his room, and his mother was directing people to pack his luggage. Seeing her son's calm face and her husband's helpless face, Yang's mother guessed that her husband did not pick up her son's words. Hey, my son, at least give your father some face. His old face is really. Yang's mother was straightforward and frank. She was fine when outsiders were around, but she was not afraid of offending others when she spoke in private. Because the men in the Yang family were all tolerant, Yang's mother sometimes dared to point out her father-in-law's faults directly. The only exception was probably her beloved eldest son. Yang Jingwei sighed and asked for a few more books. Okay, you all have to give me face, and you are still trying to offend me? Give him a few more commentaries. I don't believe that this book is not more interesting than some chemistry and physics alpha. Yang Dalang glanced at him, still without any expression. Yang's mother and Yang Jingwei gathered together and whispered a few words, waved his hand, and told him to go to the study, to play for a while by himself, and not to get in the way. Yang Dalang said goodbye and came out. As soon as he reached the door, his mother suddenly called him. Hey, you have such a bad temper. You don't talk to people who don't agree with you. Your father can't talk to you. Miss Yu doesn't like to study. How can you tolerate her, and how can she tolerate you? Yang Dalang's expression changed, as if he had changed into a different person. There was some tenderness in his eyes. Yu Yaoniang is different. How is she different? I like her, so she is different from others. Hey, you bastard. Are you saying that you don't like me, your mother? I'll beat you up. Yang's mother picked up the book and slapped it twice and drove the person away. Yang Jingwei had long been accustomed to his son's double standards. He smiled indifferently and persuaded his wife to come back. The two continued to pack things for their son. Yang Dalang walked slowly to the study, his mind full of Li Yuan's theories. until he walked into the study, lifted the curtain, and saw every girl who was signing and dozing at the table. In an instant, those theorems, formulas, and proofs all disappeared. Yu Yaoniang was not a very smart person. She might even be a little dull from the perspective of a scholar. She liked playing Kuju, swings, and polo. She was as lively and active as a wild rabbit on the mountain. The two of them had very little in common. The little knowledge of Kuju that Yang Dalang had was learned by force when he was a child in order to keep Yu Yaoniang from playing with others. But Yang Dalang just liked her. Even if Yu Yaoniang didn't understand what he said, as long as she sat by his side and looked at him with her eyes wide open, Yang Dalang was already satisfied. Yu Yaoniang's "I don't understand" was more important than any understanding between bosom friends. Although Yang Dalang didn't know how to play the things that Yu Yaoniang played and didn't like to play, he just liked to watch Yu Yaoniang play. After entering the door, Yang Dalang stood for a while, then tiptoed to pick up a book from the bookshelf, held it in his hand, and flipped through it gently. The book was a book that he had read so many times that he knew every word by heart. He didn't read the book, but for company. Yang Dalang's likes are completely different from Li Ju's likes. Li Ju wants a soulmate, but Yang Dalang wants happiness. Maybe it has something to do with their experiences. Yang Dalang's mother is similar to Yu Yaoniang. Both of them are active, lively women. The Yang family seems to be born to like such girls. Before Li Ju traveled through time, he had a sister, a brother, a father and a mother, and they were all printed out of the same mold. But his father was more old-fashioned, his mother was more domineering, his sister was more aggressive, and his brother was more sinister. In short, there was not much difference in how everyone spoke and did things. Li Ju was also used to not speaking, so his sister and brother pointed out all his ideas, saving him the effort. After traveling through time, Li Ju no longer had such relatives, and even many things, no one understood him. He was lonely, and the education he received made him unwilling to marry someone before he fell in love. So what he needed was a soulmate. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385 Genius 2. Every friendly Jew met in Dayang was compatible with him in some way. Dyeing and weaving Chen, shopkeeper Liu's boldness, Huang Zhi's uprightness, Yufu's steadfastness, Yunan's cunningness. They all had some connection, but none of them felt as close as his relatives. So Yang Dalang and Li Ju were both lonely, but Yang Dalang had found the person who was traveling with him. He only had this person by his side, but he was no longer alone. Li Ju had many friends around him, but he didn't have anyone to worry about. He was still searching alone. The various roads that had chosen the experimental sites sent teams to Jinling. Yang Dalang brought Xiao Yu Yaoniang and ran to Li Garden happily. The first to arrive were Yunmeng North and Yunmeng South, which were next to Huainan Road. The third to arrive was the Jiangji Yinsao group led by Yang Dalang. Yunmeng North and Yunmeng South are closely connected geographically and have always had a close relationship. The experimental sites chosen by the two roads are across the river from each other. One is Washao on the south side of the Yangtze River, and the other is Fansao on the north side of the Yangtze River. The two families came together, and each family carefully selected a team of 16 people to show their loyalty to the emperor and to show their closeness to Li Ju. The two Yunmeng Daos were very sincere. Most of the 32 people in the team were young and strong. All of them were smart and clever, and their diplomas were at least scholars. The leader of the team was a strong man in his 40s named Chan Shuangshi. He was a professor at the prefectural school in Washao. He was the runner-up 6 years ago, and was very knowledgeable. Yinsao was more entangled. Yang Dalang asked to come on his own initiative. The Yang family said that, even if the emperor came, let alone Yinsao, he would not be able to control it without an imperial decree. So Yang Dalang, the heir of the Yang family, came, but the others were all low-level scholars from farmers, fishermen, and clerks. However, they could recognize some words, understand some principles, and had a good body. In addition to the envoys who wanted to learn, There were guards and soldiers escorting 3 teams of people. A total of more than 100 people entered Jinling City one after another. The 3 teams were arranged to attend classes together within 10 days of each other. It was when arranging the shifts that Li Ju realized something was wrong. The candidates from Yunmeng and Liangdao were too many scholars and too few grassroots, which did not meet Li Ju's needs. Regardless of the purpose of establishing the technical station or the experience of setting up a technical station in Shengyang Prefecture, it required people who were familiar with local affairs and insightful of rural people's sentiments to mediate. The 32 people sent over were all scholars who could not carry anything. He was useless. On the contrary, Yin Zhao accidentally sent the right one. The 17 people sent by Yin Zhao, apart from other things, at least when Li Ju distributed the course outline, there was no clear version. Several people could not wait to ask Li Ju for advice on the problems they encountered in practice. Most of the scholars from Yunmeng and Liangdao expressed disgust for the part of the course outline that involved detailed explanations of soil, water, fertilizer, and plant habits. Some people even said on the spot that Li Ju was insulting their saint disciples and threatened to go to the saint temple in Ludongdao to cry for the saint. In the past, Li Ju had the patience to explain and teach, but now, Li Ju opened the door and gestured, "Please." After more than a year of practice, Li Ju had lost all his patience. Instead of wasting time with those who were unwilling, it is better to teach those who are willing to learn. It is true that His Majesty the Emperor ordered each province to select experimental sites and select personnel to study in Jinling, but he did not say that he, Li Ju, must use these people. The people sent from various places could not learn, so Li Ju asked for a replacement. Isn't that normal? There is no need to think too much about the people to be replaced. Li Ju directly selected a replacement from the guards who escorted them to Jinling. This move caused 7 or 8 scholars to strongly protest and withdraw, and there were less than 10 people left out of the original 32 people. Li Ju still didn't say anything nonsense. These people wanted to leave, so he still selected people from the guards to fill in. Most of the prefectures governed 3 or 5 counties, and the technical station of 16 people was a bit tight. Li Ju simply opened up more places. Anyone who was interested in this technical station, regardless of gender, could sign up. And because the course will last for a long time, and considering that the time of arrival of the envoys from each dao is inconsistent, Li Ju plans to arrange the course in several batches. Therefore, if the envoys from the 3 daos who have arrived want to recommend their relatives or other people to sign up, they can also send a message back immediately to ask them to come, as long as they can catch up with the last course. Calculating the time of the last course should coincide with the arrival time of Beihaidu Hufu. From Beihaidu Hufu to Jinling, it is a journey of 5,000 miles in a straight line, and there are mountains and deserts in the middle. It will take 2 years to get from Beihaidu Hufu to Jinling. 2 years is enough for the envoys from Yunmeng and the 2 daos to return after learning and send another wave of people. Li Ju doesn't know what the people who have arrived think. Anyway, the syllabus will be distributed, and Meng Erlang and others will be familiar with everyone first, so that everyone can understand the general situation of the technical station. The last period before the official start of the course is for everyone to think carefully about whether to devote themselves to this career. Those who want to quit should quit quickly, and those who want to learn should sign up quickly. If you want to quit halfway through learning, all your efforts will be wasted. What Li Ju lacks most is time and talent. During the course familiarization, Yang Dalan caught Li Ju's attention. Yang Dalan was born simple in appearance. The market fell into short-term thinking because of thinking. On the surface, he seemed a little dull and even slow to react, but as long as you talk to him a little, you can feel his inner beauty. Yang Dalan's insight and vision of grasping the key points are unmatched in Dayang. After he arrived in Jinling, he first sent Miss Yu Wu back to the Yu family, and the future couple met Yunan together. Yunan naturally tested Yang Dalang, and finally praised Yang Dalang's spirit of scholarship as his grandson-in-law, but he could do nothing about his dullness. Fu Xiaogi was surpassed by Yang Dalang in learning speed and ability to integrate knowledge, but Fuji Yui was determined to take the imperial examination. He was determined to study for the exam, and the probability of passing the exam was much greater than Yang Dalang. Yang Dalang learns quickly, but he has a lot of questions. He often discusses them with Yanan without hiding them. Yanan can do nothing about it. It is obvious that Yang Dalang can easily get a Jinshi degree with his family background and knowledge, as long as he hides his doubts about the words of the saints. However, he has no reservations about his questions. If he is allowed to take the exam, he will definitely anger several examiners. So Yanan sometimes calls Yang Dalang a day. However, Yang Dalang is a little stupid, but he can treat Miss Wu with respect. Yanan thinks that there is nothing more to ask for. Apart from other things, he traveled thousands of miles to the south to visit his wife's grandfather, which is better than 60% of the men in the world. Miss Yu Wu returned to the Yu family and hung out with her sister and mother every day. Yang Dalang returned to Fengrang Marquis Mansion and concentrated on studying with Li Ju. In the relaxation stage before the formal class, Yang Dalang took out his long-sorted questions and directly shocked Li Ju. The question itself was very simple. He asked why the relationship between instantaneous velocity and acceleration could be put into algebra, and asked about the numerical sources of the gravitational acceleration, atmospheric pressure, and calorific value of the Earth. The following questions came from the fact that Li Ju did not give the source and derivation process for any part involving numbers in class, but only gave the results. Because there were too many statements such as the gravitational acceleration of the Earth is stipulated to be 9.8 m/s². It can be said that Li Ju's miscellaneous knowledge has always been criticized. But Li Ju had no choice. To answer it, it involved many more fundamental concepts, which was too deep. The previous question, the relationship between instantaneous velocity and acceleration, involved the concept of derivative. In fact, the meaning of acceleration relative to velocity is instantaneous change, and acceleration is the derivative of velocity. But derivative is an algebraic problem. Li Ju only talked about two-variable linear equations, functions and simple two-dimensional coordinate systems in algebra. The simple two-dimensional coordinate system only talked about the relationship between the corresponding points of x and y. Nothing else was involved, let alone derivatives. However, Yang Dalang figured out the existence of the derivative of the function from the meaning of speed and acceleration. Li Ju had reason to believe that this young man might bring some changes to Dayang. Chapter 386 Classes begin. After half a month of personnel adjustment and rest, all the selected people recovered their spirits, and Li Ju's course officially began. Every morning is the theoretical course time, and the afternoon is discussion and practice. When learning general knowledge and basic theory, the accompanying class is discussion. Meng Erlang and others impart their personal experience, and people with farming and grassroots life experience share what they have seen and heard, and then everyone discusses together how to build a technical station in a certain place. After learning general knowledge and basic theory, it is time to move on to the stage of adapting measures to local conditions in various places. The two experimental sites recommended by Yaoniang are very close, and the climate and geographical environment are also very similar, so Li Ju talked about them together. The longitude and latitude of the two prefectures, the approximate altitude position, the hydrological environment, the monsoon circulation, the changes in direct sunlight, the source of water vapor, the temperature changes. All natural conditions are part of a complete system. The general education class previously taught the big system, and then focused on one or two places to teach the small cycle. The connection between the two places allowed people to learn new knowledge and review old knowledge. After a subtle influence, everyone seriously accepted what Li Ju said about physical geography and gradually learned to think about problems according to the settings taught in the course. Yaoniang and the two roads need to develop agriculture and development, and two problems are highlighted. One is water conservancy, and the other is terrain. Let's not talk about water conservancy. The Yangtze River is really no joke when it causes floods. That's fine, but the imbalance of water resources is the fundamental problem. Although Wazhou and Fanzhou are close to the river, each has tributaries and lakes, and the groundwater resources are vast, but the water resources are still unbalanced. If you are far from the river or the lake, you still have to dig a well. It is not certain that you can dig a well to the aquifer. Even if you dig a well to the aquifer, there is still a difference in distance and height. In short, drought kills those who are drought-stricken, and floods kill those who are flooded. Those places where wells cannot be dug, or the well water is unstable, can still dig for clean water in years with little rain. And those low-lying places near the river are also flooded in years with heavy rain. The terrain problem is more extensive. The plains of these two prefectures are extremely narrow. The so-called no land is flat for 3 miles is true, not counting the terraces forcibly reclaimed from the mountains and forests, only the flat land. The cultivated land area is even less than 30,000 mu. Compared with Kingshan City, there are 100,000 mu of fields in one county, which can be said to be a world of difference. Even if the terraces developed in the hills are counted, it is only 50,000. Terraces can partially solve the problem of too little cultivated land, but the manpower and animal power required for terraces are several times that of flat land. Now Dayang is most lacking in manpower. The terrain problem combined with the water conservancy problem also leads to the fact that fields and water may not necessarily match. There may not be water on flat land, and there may not be land near the water. There are also mudslides and mountain torrents waiting. Wazhou and Fanzhou are really poor and have reasons. Yunming and the two roads chose these two places, and they really hope that Liju can solve some problems. In the future, these two places will develop very well. Relying on the Yangtze River Bridge connecting the north and the south, the manufacturing industries in the two places will develop rapidly and become the most important industrial cities in the central region. Of course, there will be no problem. Now, let's take it slow now. Let's give them a short-term solution so that the technical station system can be established. Fortunately, the water resource problem in the two places lies in the imbalance of time and space, not the real lack of water. Water conservancy projects can solve most problems, but water conservancy is a long-term job that may not be completed by a generation. Thinking about it this way, it is better to use drip irrigation in places where water is scarce. Drip irrigation is much simpler than water conservancy. The terrain involves two contradictory strategies, and neither of them can be missing. That is, we must continue to change the terraces and maintain good water and soil. In addition, Liju can only think of relying on fertilizers and seeds. In places where land resources are extremely scarce and the amount of land cannot be increased, then isn't there only one way to go, which is to increase unit output? The shortcoming of Chengyang Prefecture is the lack of water. It is so dry that even the current grain seeds cannot produce the expected yield. So when Liju went there, he developed drip irrigation and drought-resistant crops. Wazhou Fanzhou is different. Their land is so small that they can use manpower to pile it up, so the shortcomings of grain production are fertilizers and seeds. To put it in an analogy, Chengyang Prefecture's agriculture is still competing with the acquired environment and efforts, while Wazhou Fanzhou competes with talent. The seed problem is easier to solve. Introducing rice breeding technology, focusing on hybrid rice, and introducing modern high-yield rice seeds at intervals are always. Fertilizer is really difficult because the shortcomings of fertilizer are also obvious. Natural fertilizers are tossed to the extreme. That's it. Without the future industrial nitrogen fertilizer, potassium fertilizer, and compound fertilizer, the ceiling is lower after all. Liju's training. The first stage is general knowledge foundation. The second stage is local natural geography and basic biology, chemistry, and mathematics knowledge, and the third stage is real technology. At this stage, it is all practical courses. Water conservancy engineering requires learning water circulation, engineering foundations, and mechanics. Breeding includes seed selection, breeding, and optimization, as well as different trays and water, fertilizer, light, and heat requirements at each growth stage. Soil and fertilizer require learning chemistry that is not currently available, as well as the composting method of soil fertilizers that are barely available now. Everything must be learned thoroughly. If you don't even understand it yourself, it would be terrible to teach others. When you get to a place, maybe one day you will get it wrong. Therefore, the exam requirements for this training class are full marks instead of passing. Since Liju screened out all those who were not interested in this, the remaining people dare not say that everyone is determined to become a god of agriculture, but at least they have aspirations to increase the grain production in their hometown. There is motivation when there is aspiration, and they will naturally take the initiative to seek knowledge without Li Ju's urging. In addition to basic agricultural technology, Li Ju also proposed sideline businesses based on local actual conditions. The sideline businesses that Li Ju opened for Yansao were vegetable planting and animal husbandry, with a special focus on improving the utilization rate of animal husbandry byproducts. The sideline businesses opened for Wazhao and Fanzhao were the breeding of fish, shrimp, crab, lotus root, and ducks. When Li Ju wrote the breeding project on the whiteboard, the faces of the students below changed. It was because fish, shrimps, and crabs were not easy to raise and died easily. Once they died, a whole pond would be destroyed. There would be no survivors. Moreover, the reason was extremely difficult to find out. It seemed that they had lost everything overnight. Before the class started, Li Ju saw that they looked unhappy and knew that he had hit a sore spot. He took an extra day to ask them about the situation in detail and then listed all the reasons he could think of. The first one was lack of oxygen. The people of Dayang did not know that aquatic animals also needed oxygen, let alone what oxygen was, let alone that pond mud, weather, and algae would affect the oxygen in the water. The second one was incomplete disinfection. The people of Dayang had no concept of disinfection at all, and the bacteria and parasites in the pond were extremely easy to spread. In the future, even with basic disinfection, some deadly bacteria would often be awakened due to weather changes, not to mention the ancient times when there was no disinfection process. In addition, poor breeding results in too few fry production and too high survival costs. The fry become food for other wild animals due to the food chain, and the fry escape due to poor defense. Chapter 387 Transformation. After Li Ju sorted out the 10 major reasons for the failure of fish farming, he found loopholes everywhere. Of course, there are still problems that could not be solved in ancient times, that is, the modern optimized varieties. This is not a big problem. Genetics is there, and optimized breeding can also be learned. The students listened with doubts. Li Ju simply took them to the experimental field and explained in detail how the pond in Li Garden worked by comparing it with the pond in Li Garden. Li Ju's own pond was next to the school. There were net cages in the foregrids. Father and mother raised small fish fry strictly according to the guidance materials given by Li Ju. The pond has always been prosperous. Even if everyone had doubts facing the pond in Li Garden, they had to believe that fish farming said by Li Ju was really feasible. They believed in their hearts that Li Ju's ideas were correct, and the next course was easy to learn. Fish, shrimp, and crab farming are only a small part of the fields involved in the technical stations of Wazhao and Fanzhao, but they have introduced a new knowledge system, that is, animal husbandry. Li Ju was still the one who talked about the big picture, but this time the technical details were given by Fu Dad and Fu Niang. Especially Fu Niang. Her specialty is poultry. Since Wazhao Fanzhao can consider raising ducks, it is natural to invite her out. Fu Niang also has 2 or 3 colleagues who are assigned tasks in the animal husbandry industry with her. Now that she has become a master, she and Fu Niang will teach the selected envoys how to raise ducks, how to can duck eggs, how to mark the duck's beak, how to disinfect the duck house, how to mix feed, how to deal with common injuries and diseases. The work is really detailed, and everyone has learned it seriously. Even with pictures and notes, everyone has written a thick book, so that they can verify each other in the future. When raising ducks in the wild, as long as they don't starve to death or get stolen, it's fine. Once the scale is up, they can't be extensive. Otherwise, if an infectious disease dies, the whole village will die, which is terrible. Raising ducks, fish, and rice. Rice-based fish ponds and rice-based ducks can also be arranged to improve space utilization, which is suitable for the southern mountains, where natural conditions are good, but land is too scarce. There are successful cases of rice-based ponds in Huangshuang, and they have been maintained for the past 2 years. After learning the basic technology at Liuan Academy, Li Ju sent these people to the Huangshuang experimental field in Qingshan City to see with their own eyes what the mature rice-based fish ponds and rice-based crab ponds are like. After finishing the general education course, the envoys of Yaoniang and Yansao separated. Yansao is short of water, and it is impossible to follow the development route of Yanmengdao. It is closer to Chengyang Prefecture. However, Yansao's water shortage is not entirely due to geographical reasons. The bigger reason is the water absorption effect of Chang'an. Chang'an has millions of residents, and the living water is enough for the surrounding areas to drink a pot. Moreover, Chang'an is an ancient capital for several generations, and the groundwater has long been polluted and almost unusable. Let Li Ju say that, if the capital is moved to Yanjing, all the problems in Yinzhou can be solved. Of course, this is pure nonsense and fantasy. How can a country's capital be moved? In another time and space, the main purpose of Emperor Chengzu of Ming Dynasty moving the capital to Yanjing was to resist the threat from the north. The threat from the north does not exist in Dayang. There are thousands of kilometers of territory to the north of Yanjing. It is more like the dual capital system of the Tang Dynasty. Subject to the major prerequisite of Chang'an, the development route of Yinzhou is actually very clear. Do a good job in transportation construction. Everything can be said with transportation. Whether it is non-staple food, vegetables, and fruits, or opening a homestay to entertain people coming to Beijing, it all depends on convenient transportation. Transportation in the Dayang era was road construction and dredging of rivers. The second prince brought wooden track technology back to Beijing, and it is unknown when Yinzhou can use it. What Li Ju can teach them is greenhouses, composting, scientific breeding methods, new varieties and wooden track transportation technology. By the way, I also reorganized Meng Erlang and his friends. After all, his time in Chengyang prefecture was too short, and he spent a lot of time on the salt drying method. The real greenhouse technology was only taught superficially. Yinzhou is also suitable for drip irrigation. Meng Erlang and his friends really implemented the drip irrigation method. During the implementation process, they also encountered many strange situations. It was just right for both sides to teach together. Meng Erlang and his friends showed their own experience, and there was also the meaning of mutual learning. As the leader of the people sent by Yinzhou, Yang Dalan was very interested in the new knowledge taught by Li Ju, and was a little resistant to the pure manual work. However, after really learning it, Yang Dalan gradually felt the benefits. Some illusory things, especially those in the scope of classical mechanics, can only be felt in practice, so Yang Dalan was willing to learn it seriously. Like Yun Meng and the two Daos, after learning the basic technology, Li Ju also sent them to experience the practicality firsthand. Greenhouse cultivation existed in Jinling, and wooden tracks were gradually laid around Jinling. The 17 people from Yinzhou went relatively close, so they only had to wander around the suburbs of Jinling. Jinling people used greenhouses mostly to cultivate precious crops, such as off-season vegetables, and precious flowers and medicinal materials, that were difficult to overwinter locally. Some people even built greenhouses for lions and tigers. Because the estrus periods of lions and tigers were inconsistent, they were not suitable for lions and tigers. They used greenhouses to control the temperature, slowly coordinated lions and tigers together, and raised rare lions and tigers, calling them auspicious signs, and making capital for their careers. Li Ju looked down on this use, but the people of Yinzhou thought it was good. These various uses were more suitable for industries near the suburbs of Beijing than simply growing vegetables. The land prices in the suburbs of Beijing were so expensive, and there was little land that could be cultivated. Most of them were built with houses and tombs, leaving only a few fields, which could not be compared with the hinterland of the Central Plains, and the land of fish and rice. The water, fertilizer, light, and heat were just so-so, and they were just useless. It is better to plant a camellia and a clump of bamboo than to plant a cart of vegetables and millet in Yinzhou. The temperature in Chang'an is cold, and plants like bamboo, that like warm environments do not live well. However, there are many literati in Chang'an, and they all think that bamboo has integrity. Officials and hermits all like bamboo. If some bamboo is planted in Yinzhou, I'm afraid that one bamboo will be worth a cart of millet. Considering the flow of money, that is, considering that the rich people's pursuit of high-priced luxury goods will actually increase exploitation, Li Ju wanted to take advantage of the topic of market supply and demand and resource advantages. However, these topics did not help to change their cognition, and blindly asking people not to care about short-term interests was too inhumane. In the final analysis, whether it is exploited or not does not depend on whether the rich bought a clump of bamboo today, but whether a system can limit the source of this purchasing power. So Li Ju did not say those words. That would spoil the fun. Instead, he carefully inquired about what was popular in Chang'an now and prepared corresponding planting methods and seedlings for them. In addition to bamboo and camellia, there are also bananas and orchids. Although the crops would definitely not grow well, it was enough to be able to sell at a good price. Li Ju let go of his previous worries and taught the people of Yansao how to use greenhouses to manage off-season crops and crops that prefer warmth in the south, which sparked a little discussion among his relatives and friends who were more familiar with him. In the past, Li Ju refused to sell even his own ancestral Kazang Mirenhuo in Jiangnan, and would rather carry it thousands of miles outside the Great Wall than to let it bloom in Jiangnan. Before, Jinling learned greenhouse technology and first asked the rich families to find some rare treasures to keep, which also made Li Ju think about it for a long time. As a result, Li Ju is now willing to let go and teach people how to do this. Not to mention Huang Zhi and others who were far away in Qingshan were surprised. Even Chen Guiyang and the third prince who had only known him in recent years felt something was wrong. Chapter 388, Dream Paradise. Li Ju had only been teaching Yansao people how to grow bamboo in greenhouses for 2 days when the third prince and Chen Guiyang found an opportunity to come to him and ask about it. Li Ju said a few simple words, and it was clear that he was not in high spirits. The third prince asked, "Teacher, you taught me before that there are only a few ways for rich people to make money now, and no matter which one, it all comes down to plundering the peasants. But now you have taught them ways to please the preferences of the rich and powerful. Won't they exploit them even more in the future?" Li Ju, who rarely lay flat on the rocking chair like a salted fish, replied, "There is nothing we can do about it. Bamboo and bird bells are all fat meat. If such a large piece of fat meat is placed in front of us, and the peasants are not allowed to eat it, will the rich eat it like in Jinling? They eat the first bite of meat, then buy some land, and monopolize the market, and the people who follow behind can't even drink the soup. And I have also figured it out. In the rolling torrent, you and I are just a praying mantis." The third prince said, "But even if it is a praying mantis, if it can stop the wheel for even a moment, it can save many ants, and it seems worth it." Li Ju replied, "It is indeed worth it, but it will be worth it if we can get more ants on the car. I have also thought of something else. The technical station is endorsed by the court and under our supervision. Even if it is not checked for a while and becomes a tool for some people with ulterior motives to make profits, it should still be able to serve the people most of the time. As long as the technical station is still there, the rich and nobles will not be able to monopolize technology, so the people can make more money. Regardless of where the money for the rich to buy these non-essentials comes from, they must take out the gold and silver in the warehouse and give it to the farmers. No matter how much the farmers are taken away, they can always keep a little more. And what you and I have to do is to try our best to keep the technical station in a position to serve the people. When he enters politics in the future, don't forget to control his desire for power. Think about the people at the bottom of everything first." Princess Chen Guiyang, who had been listening silently, asked, "But you are not happy, and you don't believe it yourself?" Li Ju looked up at the princess sitting beside him. Chen Guiyang had always preferred men's clothing in recent years, and today was no exception. Because he had been running around with them, his life had become rougher and rougher. He had become darker, thinner, and more energetic, and looked more like a lively young man. Chen Guiyang had always been very perceptive, and Li Ju was not surprised that she could observe his true thoughts. He lay back weakly. When the power of the court is unlimited, it is very dangerous to pin all hopes on the court and the monarch. People's ideas will change. Even if a person does not change his will from beginning to end, will his heirs and his executors never change? It's just that the general trend will be better, but it can't save the ants in front of us. The third prince said, "It's not bad. What are you struggling with, brother? What are you struggling with?" "I'm avoiding it. Can't you see that I'm avoiding the difficulties in front of me? This is not right. My elders taught me to face difficulties, but I chose to escape and bypass them. Isn't it against the training?" Princess Chen Guiyang said, "Escape is shameful, but it is useful. Let's take one step at a time. What else can we do?" "Sir, what kind of world did your ancestors experience?" "The world of utopia, the great harmony and well-being." "I said it. It's old-fashioned to say it again." No, I'm asking how your ancestors solved these problems. It's not just about exploitation, there are other problems as well. For example, how can you manage the affairs of Kingshan City and Jinling? And how can the court and the government manage every village and every person? We can only count the population here once every 10 years or so. Li Ju's shaking frequency has decreased a little. Because of science and technology. Why should I put technology that everyone despises in such a high position? It's because development can solve problems. In the era of my ancestors, all places had to execute the orders issued by the court, and all feedback from the execution could reach the government office in charge of the matter in 1 second. People can travel 20,000 miles a day by taking the right tools. The transportation is highly developed, and any village has an extremely smooth road to reach other places. Everyone's information is recorded in the court's book, including the person's name, relatives, age and gender, his birthplace, where he studied, what mistakes he made, what good deeds he did, where he had been, where he went today, what he bought, his income and expenditure for the year. The court knew all of this, and naturally knew what he had encountered. Naturally, those who break the law must be punished, and those who do good deeds must be rewarded. The things that trouble us were easy to deal with in my ancestors' place, but they are impossible to deal with in Dayang. A village in Dayang. No, not to mention a village. Let's just say that the grain merchants in Huajia County bullied the local people. Such a big thing. If it weren't for the punishment of heaven, who would know? Where there is no supervision, there will be crimes. This is human nature. Li Ju hasn't even talked about the most fundamental political system. Alas. After a brief silence, the third prince asked, "Sir, are you sure this is where your ancestors lived? In the past 2 years, I couldn't help but start to doubt that maybe it was really just a dream. But it is always true." Li Ju spread out his hands, and a badge with a red background and gold lacquer shone in his hand. In the utopia world, there are also remote villages, where conflicts and disputes also occur, and they are bullied by bad people. The judges responsible for handling these matters, in our place, it is usually the lawyers and county lieutenants who play the corresponding roles. They will carry the national emblem that symbolizes the country, and go to the most remote mountain villages to uphold justice. Your Highness, our county lieutenants and lawyers are not unwilling to go, but they can't do it. Why can't they do it? Even if the mountain villages in the utopia world you mentioned are easier to go, can't we still go there, as long as we have more people? Li Ju held up 3 fingers, and showed them to him one by one. First, there are not enough people. The grain output of Taoyuan world is 1000 kilograms, and it is calculated after drying. I wonder if the per capita grain output here is 300 kilograms. How many clerks and officials can Taoyuan world support to support the introduction of laws into the village? And how many clerks and officials can we support to do this? Kingshan City has gradually become well off in recent years and can buy food from overseas, so it can afford to support a group of temporary workers who can barely take care of the suburbs and main roads. If we count further, we can't help. Second, there is not enough information. When a dispute occurs in Taoyuan world, you can find a lot of evidence to deduce and prove who should bear what responsibility, but here, it is difficult to find evidence in the place where the village was massacred. Go and testify against the murderer. Not to mention that we can find out a person's 8 generations of ancestors with just 1 drop of blood. I will only say one thing, that is, fingerprint identification. In Dayang, fingerprint identification is almost an impossible task. Third, the people are not enlightened. I do not deny that there are bad people, evil deeds, and sheltering in the Taoyuan world, but because everyone in the Taoyuan world can afford to eat and read, people's bottom line is higher, and they also know to seek help from the court when they are bullied, while the vast majority of people in Dayang are bullied to death, and they only know to hang themselves at the other party's door. Not to mention the distant ones. Just look at Sanjiu, the mute Wuda Guanjia, and Fugaya's parents. They were displaced and fell to the point where I took them in. Someone must have violated the law, but what can I do? Princess Chengyang may not know about other people's affairs, but Chengyang has already inquired about the origins of Li Yuan and others. Whether it was Sanjiu and the Mewtwo were wiped out, the housekeeper Wu who was tortured by the landlord Wu to the point of losing his family, or father and mother Fu, if you compare their experiences carefully, one of them should be sent to jail. But at that time, they had neither the awareness nor the ability to sue the officials. They didn't even know what crime their enemies had committed, and they didn't even know where to go to the city to file a complaint. So how could they sue? Chapter 389, Sadness and Farewell. The third prince asked Li Ju, "Brother, I think that in the world of your dreams, you will not be born with 1,000 kilograms of grain and a horse that can travel 10,000 miles a day. We should be able to learn it. Don't you think so?" Chen Guiyang said, "I always feel that Mr. Li is already planning this." Li Ju nodded. "Start with the steam engine and general education. It will be almost the same when we enter the electric age. Nothing is a castle in the air. Let's do it step by step. I hope that I can see us standing at the entrance of the world of Taoyuan in my lifetime." That's what he said, but there is no sign of the steam engine, so it's hard to predict the future. After figuring out Li Ju's idea, Chen Guiyang and the third prince had no other ideas to talk about. Because of the mention of steam engine, Chen Guiyang went out of the back door of the Marquis mansion and took a few people to the technical point of focusing on the steam engine. The money for this technical point was supported by Li Yuan, Chen Guiyang, local merchants and mine owners. They were very convinced of Li Ju, and they had their own account office to check the accounts regularly, so they were not afraid of being made up by others. So they let the people at the technical point start the experimental topics frantically. When Chen Guiyang quietly visited the technical point, he was still some distance away from Yaochen Temple. Before he reached the place where he dismounted, he heard a loud noise, like a bolt from the blue, which made people's brains dazed. Looking at the people around him, they all looked accustomed to it. Chen Guiyang often walked around Jinling, and every time he went out, he would have many handsome followers. Many residents around him were familiar with Chen Guiyang. When everyone saw Chen Guiyang and her friends' faces of surprise, an aunt who was selling incense and candles nearby took the initiative to greet them and said, "Good girl, are you scared? They are doing some 10 tests and 9 tests. I heard that they are almost successful, but they can't seal the last point. They explode every day, but it's just a noise. It's not a big deal." Chen Guiyang steadied his horse and smiled. "Thank you, sister, this is really loud. If there is such a sound during the war, it will scare the horse. I have to go and take a look." Many people would think that such occasional explosions would be dangerous, but Chen Guiyang, who is familiar with the design drawings and design concepts of steam engines, thinks of something else. The fact that it could make such a loud noise showed how much energy the whole object stored before the explosion. Once it was controlled and used according to Li Ju's design, it would be done. So Chen Guiyang was a little anxious. She hurried forward and went to the technical point in a few jumps. The Yaochen Temple next door. Master Li Yaoniang and the children in the temple have become accustomed to the occasional convulsions next door. Since the Li Yuan third textile factory built a factory building here by blocking the dam, and with the technology supported by Chen Guiyang, the area around Yaochen Temple has developed quite well. At least after the families of workers and craftsmen gathered, a large settlement was formed here, so merchants and other things also prospered. Master Li Yaoniang was good at making witty remarks and had a fixed group of pilgrims, but he was not used to this kind of prosperity. It was glorious, but he couldn't stand the stories that happened every other day. The most important thing about Yaochen Temple was quiet and elegant. Considering that the thing was Princess Chen Guiyang's industry and the technical point that Li Ju strongly supported, Master Li Yaoniang thought it would be better to move it himself. Anyway, Princess Chen Guiyang's territory is very large. If he moves to the city gate, it will be more convenient for the ladies and ladies of Jinling to burn incense in the future. At least it is safer in the temple. Coincidentally, Chen Guiyang also thought so. This technical point is a bit small. It is a bit crowded to put the R&D team of the steam engine, and it is also stuffed with a team of spinning and looms. Soon, there will be a cotton gin, which will be even more crowded. Master Wang Chan came to Chen Guiyang to inspect and waited for Chen Guiyang to walk around the technical station. Chen Guiyang and the craftsman put together the exploded cylinder. With his understanding of physics, he guessed that the explosion was caused by the thermal expansion of the steam temperature being too high, which broke through the relatively fragile sealing glue. The sealant used in the current steam engine is resin, which is a soft and elastic thing formed by the colloid taken from the tree after processing. It is not as durable as rubber, but it is enough as a sealing material for a short time. This is just a guess. When Chen Guiyang arrived here, he saw people discussing and solving problems with the knowledge taught by Li Ju, and his irritable heart calmed down again. The utopia world that Li Ju talked about is better than Dayang, but they all live in Dayang, and this is a current situation. Everyone thinks that the world of Datang is very good, but there is no shadow of it. Everyone is working towards that direction, and trying to find the right path. Maybe Li Ju will know which way is right, and he will also understand that everyone's ideal will eventually become a reality. But the people who are struggling are the group of people who are alive now. There is nothing to be irritated about. If the ideal has not been realized, just work hard to realize it. After calming down her restless brain, Princess Chen Guiyang left her small factory and met Liu Yaoniang, who was meditating on a big rock on the side of the road. Both of them wanted to talk about the relocation of the temple, and they happened to meet at the right time. After seeing the greetings, Master Liu Yaoniang and the mother of the sponsor invited people to Yaochen Temple and presented him with tea cakes made by himself. While Chen Guiyang was praising the sesame tea cakes, Master Liu Yaoniang mentioned it, and Chen Guiyang immediately made a decision and gave up a house in Jinling City. I'm thinking that it would be better to move to the city rather than being closer to Jinling City. Firstly, the nearby mountains and forests may be remembered by the Marquis someday to do something, and then you may have to move again. Secondly, your temple is, after all, half a charity, and you have adopted so many children. It would be safer to keep them in Jinling City, and the children's future development would be better. If you have no other ideas, I think that after I leave, you can live in my villa and be neighbors with Marquis Fengrang. The children in the temple can learn to read and write from an early age under Marquis Fengrang's guidance. Zen Master Liu Yaoniang was moved when he heard this. It's good, your highness is really compassionate. I just don't know what Marquis Fengrang thinks. We are Buddhists, and the Marquis does not believe in these things. Who cares if he believes it or not? You have so many children here, so he naturally can't say anything. Maybe during the New Year or other festivals, or every now and then, he will give you some incense money for raising the children. As Chen Guiyang spoke, he called a little girl in flowery clothes from the group of children who were gathering incense ashes not far away, handed her a tea cake, and coaxed her to eat it. Chen Guiyang himself had no children, but he was always very good to children. Even Yushana, the daughter who was in her eyes and heart, could be well taken care of by Chen Guiyang. I know you, and I know him too. How could you not even be neighbors, because of different beliefs? You monks don't eat meat, and there shouldn't be meat in the temple. It's just because you secretly learned the nutrition that the Marquis talked about. Now children also eat eggs, and monks often have tofu and soy milk to eat. You have this intention. How could Marquis Fengrang not know it? After Chen Guiyang finished speaking, Luang smiled, and Chen Guiyang also smiled, but suddenly his face became melancholy. I just don't know how long I can live in that house. I heard that the Teifu family married a new daughter-in-law. I'm afraid it won't be long before His Majesty and the Queen will be called back to my house. Chapter 390, Practical Operations in Rice-Based Fish Ponds. Chen Guiyang was filled with infinite melancholy, and the Zen Master Liu Yaoniang who accompanied her suddenly recited 2 lines of poetry. Entering the lotus pond, picking laurel branches, fragrant leaves fluttering, fragrant leaves spread. Chen Guiyang certainly knew where these 2 lines of poetry came from, and the 2 lines of poetry were followed by a line 2 people miss each other, but neither knows. She smiled and said, "Monk, you are wrong. It's not that I don't know, and it's not that he misses each other." Liu Yaoniang thought that he didn't know as much as Chen Guiyang, so he apologized and asked Chen Guiyang to coordinate the relocation of the temple. If you open a temple in a bustling metropolis, you must get along with your neighbors, otherwise the mundane world is enough to drink a pot of water, so what's the point of practicing Zen? Chen Guiyang listened to the sutras sung by the monk Wei in Yaochen Temple for a while, which was a localized Buddhist story, and played games with the children for a while. Before leaving, He gave each of them a box of tea cakes and then hurried back to the city before the sun set. When I left, my heart was sad, and when I came back, the mountains were just right. Since Li Ju started to work hard on the people's livelihood economy, life in Jinling City has become better. Before, the rich were rich, the rich were the merchants, the rich were the powerful, and the lower class people were ravaged by the flood, and there was no new livelihood. How could they live? It was not until Li Yuan's industry was gradually transferred to Jinling that it gradually became prosperous. Therefore, the homes of ordinary people that Chen Guiyang saw along the way were already very different from what she saw when she first came to Jinling. Chen Guiyang didn't like to socialize with the ladies, but she came to the surrounding areas of Jinling many times, and she could be regarded as seeing the people of Jinling turn over with her own eyes. The trip to Yaochen Temple calmed Chen Guiyang's heart. Seeing the happy homes of the people along the way, compared with the poverty and backwardness of other places, Chen Guiyang had a feeling that, even if I can't touch the door to the new world in this life, it's not in vain, and it's not in vain for Li Baxiu's efforts to fight for it. Li Ju would temporarily compromise with reality in order to realize his ideals, so why should she be hypocritical? Facts have proved that Li Ju's compromise is very meaningful. Whether it is the planting of cash crops in Yanshan or the prosperity of Jinling flower gardens, at least objectively, they have promoted the money that was moldy in the warehouses of wealthy families to enter the market. No matter where the money comes from, or who will take it away, it is put into circulation anyway. Once it is put into circulation, it must be used in more than one link. Generally speaking, wealth has increased. The total amount of wealth has increased, and the people involved in production will always get a little more money, even if more is taken away. Maybe 50 taels of silver were produced in a year, and 80% was taken away, leaving 10 taels. Now 500 taels of silver can be produced in a year, and 90% was taken away, leaving 50 taels. It is exploited more severely, but it is always a little more. Li Ju enjoyed it. As long as the people can learn technology and knowledge, keep the pace of progress with productivity, they can maintain their own advancement. What happens in the future will not be decided by one or two people. The people of the Jinling Qingshan generation are still happy with their own annual income growth, and they can't think of Li Ju calculating such a long future for the time being. When Li Ju traveled between Jinling and Qingshan, he would basically stay in the poorest families in each village, one to help out, and the other to experience the suffering of the poor people in this era up close. He had to remind himself not to leave this class. In fact, such a family still had a house and a few acres of thin land, which was far from the bottom of Dayang. The bottom of Dayang was the displaced people who had no place to stand. In Qingshan, such people were recruited and assigned some work according to their abilities, so that they could at least have a tile to shelter from the rain and a single piece of clothing to keep out the cold. But other places have not progressed to this level. Only Jinling is better. After the arrival of Yu Yaoniang in Jinling, the atmosphere of Jinling officialdom was renewed, and Chen Guiyang and others set an example, and did a good job. So in recent years, there has been a lot of porridge and relief, and several poverty relief offices have been added one after another, which has reduced the number of beggars and widows wandering on the streets of Jinling City. What Li Ju can do for these people is to think of as many ways as possible to increase their income. Most of the time it is useful. Nowadays, women in half of Jiangnan use flying shuttles to weave cloth, which has made a great contribution to Dayang's maritime trade. Some clever girls, especially those born in craftsman families like Yu Yaoniang, even if they can't weave, can understand the principle of flying shuttles by watching their relatives and friends weaving. They can collide the strengths of craftsmen with the strengths of flying shuttles again. Now there are 3 generations of flying shuttles on the market. The width and firmness of the cloth have been able to catch up with modern pure natural cotton and linen cloth without special treatment, and the weaving efficiency is 3 times higher than that of the first generation. The girls with clever hands and quick minds installed petals on the looms to completely free their hands. When the looms are turned on, pairs of hands that have been worn out by life shuttle through the strands of silk threads, like dancing butterflies. In the past 2 years, Li Ju has urged a lot of road construction. In the past year, rail tracks have been laid one after another. The area of Qingshan Jinling plus the seaport has suddenly become as prosperous as the canal ferry in Chang'an. Yu Yaoniang passed through a vibrant village, and the envoy sent by Yaoniang and the other two roads were also looking for answers in one village after another. The rice-based fish pond and rice-based crab pond that Li Ju experimented with in Huangsheong have been promoted to a certain extent. Rice-flowered fish and rice-flowered crabs are already common foods on people's tables. Although fish, shrimp, crabs and shellfish are not considered serious meat dishes, the protein they provide is crucial to the development of the human body, especially the intellectual development of children. It is difficult to tell whether someone is smart or not in a short period of time, but most smart children have stronger curiosity and are more active, which is obvious. It is obvious that children who often eat cooked fish and cooked crabs seem to be healthier and more lively, and the number of infants and young children who survive is also higher. When the envoys from Wazhou and Fanzhou visited each household, local farmers mentioned these differences more or less. Qian Beihu from Shuangai village, who was the first to get the shuttle and signed up when the technicians from Huangsheong promoted the rice-based fish pond, is the most typical representative. When Qian Beihu met Li Ju, it was the most difficult days. There was no food in the house, and it was rainy. His son was working odd jobs outside to make a living, and he was seriously ill at home. Li Ju and the mute stayed at his house for one night, helped him to find a doctor, and gave a bowl of food to the neighbor to take care of him. Li Ju left a sleeping bag and a few cans to keep Qian Beihu alive. Before leaving, Li Ju repaired the roof, door, and wall for him, helped him to harvest the vegetable field, and prepared firewood and drinking water. Just relying on Li Ju's kindness, Qian Beihu lived until his son came home. Later, the father and son opened 2 acres of wasteland on the riverside and made a living. Later, several farmers from Li's experimental field came to the village to teach people how to make rice-based fish ponds. Others in the village hesitated and dared not learn. Qian Beihu heard that this rice-based fish pond was presided over by Li Ju, and without saying a word, he directly arranged it for all his own land. Chapter 391 Practical Lesson 1. Qian Beihu's life changed the day he met Li Ju, and it was completely changed when he started to turn to rice-based fish ponds. One year, there was a heavy rain, and the rice was harvested in a rush. It was not ripe, so it was a deficit, but the fish that year was very fat, and relying on rice field fish and disaster relief grain, that year was still okay. Last year was very good, with a bumper harvest of grain. The government warehouses and the people's warehouses were full, and the fish farming was very profitable. He also raised rice field crabs last year, and picked up a basket of palm-sized crabs. These crabs are not as good as the meat crabs carefully raised by wealthy families, nor as good as the blue crabs that weigh 2 or 3 pounds at the seaside. The advantage is that, by the way, they are also plump and meaty, but lack a little flavor, but it is still a very good extra income. The envoys from Yunmeng and Meng scattered to several villages along the way to collect folk songs, and 2 of them wandered to Qian Beihu's land. Just looking at the fish in the fields and chattering on the imperial ditch, you know that this must be a rice-based fish pond. One of them was from Wazhou, surnamed Ou, and the other was from Fanzhou, surnamed Zin. Both of them were scholars who jumped out of farming families, and they were not as pure as scholars from scholarly families. Scholar Ou and Scholar Zin did not forget their roots, and they also hoped to change the appearance of their hometown, so they stayed and studied hard. They were lucky. When they left the Huangsheong experimental field and entered the first village nearby, they saw the rice-based fish pond. Even more precious was the crabs that Qian Beihu was picking on the field. He picked up the crabs from the crab pond, kept the big ones, and returned the small ones to the field. When the bag was full, he sent it to the canal dug by the creek to clean it, and then tied it up with long leaves of reeds and calamus. The 2 scholars walked along the ridge of the field and finally came to the big tree beside the canal. They half saluted to Qian Beihu and said, "Father, we are students of Li Yuan, that is, students of Master Li, the Marquis of Fengrang. We are learning how to raise fish in the rice field. Can we ask you for advice?" In order to learn about raising rice field fish and crabs, Qian Beihu could understand and roughly speak Mandarin. When he heard such a fluent Mandarin, he saw that they were 2 very literary young men. Although they looked and dressed ordinary, they were scholars at first glance. He hurriedly sprinkled water in the crab basket, covered it with lotus leaves, and then carried it behind his back. saying, "What are you asking for advice? You are the top scholar, and we are country people. We are taught by Masterly. Why doesn't the top scholar ask Masterly, but ask us?" Kanbei was very respectful to scholars. Any ordinary people in this era would be like this to scholars, unless the scholar himself was not very good, then others would also teach him a good lesson of hypocrisy. Scholar Ou and scholars in had a proper attitude and spoke nicely. When Kanbei heard that they were Li Ju students, he thought that they were his benefactor students, so he had to be more respectful. He kept talking all the way until they reached his own yard at the end of the field. Rice-based fish ponds are good, but not all fields are suitable. At least the rotten vegetable field next to Kanbei's house is not suitable. On the way, scholars in also answered Kanbei's doubts. Masterly has taught us everything, but he is afraid that we have only learned theory on paper, that is, reading books in vain, and not seeing things in the field, so he asked us to go out to the field to take a look. I looked and saw that there was no difference from what was written in the book, so I wanted to find someone who actually raises fish, crabs and ducks in the rice fields, to ask for detailed advice. "Hey, how can I teach you, whether I want to teach or not? I'll just talk to you about raising fish and crabs." Scholars in was very handsome and sweet-mouthed. Kanbei liked him and invited him to sit in his yard. Kanbei's son was not at home. Taking advantage of the free time during these few days, he went to help in the village's public fields. Kanbei was the only one here. He put the crabs in a cool corner and put a pottery basin under them to prevent them from drying out and losing water. After putting the crabs away, he took a bamboo tube from the big Nanmu bamboo pole behind the house, split it in two, cut it into 2 cups, fetched 2 cups of boiled and cooled well water, and brought them out to the 2 scholars, 1 cup each, saying, "You scholars are delicate, be careful of the barbs on it. The water is boiled water. Except for the lazy leper, we all drink boiled water here." The 2 scholars thanked him, took the bamboo tube cups, and took a sip each. Zinziake asked, "Masterly also taught you this, right?" "Yes, yes. Masterly opened a private school in the city, and we went to attend the classes during the slack season. Masterly said that raw water, raw fish, raw meat and raw vegetables are all forbidden to be eaten or drunk, as they will breed worms. So we don't like to eat raw food anymore." Kanbei also took a bowl of water, feeling deeply moved. Masterly is really amazing. He has supported so many people. Take boiling water for example. If the master hadn't taught us, who would have known that there were worms in the water? The rice field fish farming you are asking about is even more of a treasure. As long as it is well managed, 2 crops of rice can produce 2 crops of fish. 2 to 300 kilograms of rice can also produce 100 kilograms of fish. 1 kilogram of fish can earn 4 or 5 cents, and you can earn several taels of silver a year. The children and daughter-in-law at home can also eat some fish meat and fish soup. The protein in it, do you know what protein is? But it can support people. 2 years ago, my family was the only one doing this, and we encountered a disaster year, so we made no profit or loss. Last year, we had a bumper harvest, and my son would go out to make fish noodles every other day, which made the kids next door very greedy. This year, not everyone is raising fish. This year, a wooden track car was built on the road, and fresh fish and crabs were caught and handed over to the delivery trucks. When they passed by, I heard that they can be sold in the city to restaurants in less than half an hour. This is a good thing that is fresh, and it can be sold for a few more coins than in previous years. Kanbei was muttering, and the aunts and children who had not gone out nearby also came over. All the families with suitable fields dug fish pits in the fields to raise fish. There are also many people who have started to raise crabs and ducks like Kanbei. When they heard Kanbei reminiscing about the past, they also recalled it word by word. In the end, life is getting better and better, and there is more hope. Kanbei's family was the first to turn things around, and other families also followed suit and embarked on a good path. When these families have extra money, they will donate it to the public sacrificial fields and ancestral temples, and use it for the construction of private warehouses and schools, raising the weak and orphans, caring for the elderly, storing food to deal with famines, etc. The village is on the right path to rise. However, recently the village plans to put the school on hold and communicate with Liu and school first to set up an agricultural technology station. His Majesty the Emperor ordered each province to select a state, county, or prefecture as an experimental site. Does Hualien province still need to choose? Isn't that Dasan County? In short, Dasan County should have a technology station system. The villagers unanimously believe that this technology station is more important than the school, so they have been planning it recently. The technology station can also undertake the initial literacy task, and technicians can also teach children to recognize words. Children learn to recognize words first, and then read and recite, which is not considered to delay their studies. On the contrary, if the school is built first, the village will inevitably have a tight time for a while, and it may even lag behind other villages that have learned new technologies. Kanbeu and his neighbors were excitedly thinking about how to set up a technical station. Suddenly, he remembered that Xinxiake and Ouzxiake also came here to learn farming techniques, so he asked them, after you learned about rice field fish farming, did you go home and teach others? If so, that would also be a technical station, which would be perfect, and it would match up with the one in our village. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 Practical Lesson 2. Xinxiake and Ouzxiake only found out that the village had already set up a technical station, and Kanbeu's son went to work in the public field today, and he was also working at the technical station. The two scholars didn't want to leave immediately. It was so rare for them to participate in the entire process of setting up a technical station from scratch to putting it into operation. Uncle Kyan, can you take us to see the technical station in your village? First, we can help, and second, we have to build this when we go back, so it's a good opportunity to learn first. Kanbeu thought, that's really good, and immediately took people to the public field. After talking to the village chief agreed, and the next thing was easy. Although it's called building, the most important work is not to build a house. The house is ready, just vacate 2 rooms with a small courtyard from the public house next to the public field. By the way, the 2 acres of land next to it were also given to the technical station. Now the village is busy renovating the house, preparing bedding and furnishings, and cleaning up the yard, cellar, etc. These can be done in just 1 or 2 days. More important is the allocation of money, grain and manpower. The technical stations are fed with public grain, but it is not realistic to transport it from the prefectural capital and county government offices to various places, so a purchasing system is implemented. That is, the money is given by the central court to the technical station system, and then distributed to each station by the technical station level. Each station uses this money to purchase money and grain on its own. This is the public grain given by the court. Since the technical station mainly serves a specific small area, the beneficiaries are also the people in this small area, so this small area also has to pay a part of the money and grain. Specifically for this village, it is to take a part of the public income such as public land and sacrificial fields, to give to the technical station. There is no unified requirement for the detailed proportion. The public grain is enough for the operation of the technical point, which is equivalent to the extra bonus given by the village. How to give the extra bonus is the first problem. The second problem is manpower. The mechanism of the technical station is to study in a centralized manner and teach separately. That is, some people will go to the county or even the prefectural capital to receive new knowledge, come back to teach everyone, and stay in the technical station to deal with the problems encountered in the promotion of new knowledge and new technologies. There are at least 2 groups of people here, those who go to the prefectural capital and county to study, and the first batch of people who take classes. Kanbeu's son was fighting for the position in front, because that position was the one that could eat public food. And only when he became a technician could he run around all year round instead of being trapped in his own land. There were also several types of people in front, those who managed accounts, those who learned quickly, those who did odd jobs. They were all different. Of course, this was what Xinxiake and his friends heard from Yu Yaoniang and others. At present, the village has not yet realized that even for simple things like going out to learn knowledge and coming back to attend classes, there would still be division of labor. Zinziake and Oyuziake did not point fingers and say what was wrong. They just listened quietly. Only when people encountered something obviously difficult would they take the initiative to help. For example, they had to calculate a number, write a couplet, understand the rules of the county technical station, and so on. The two scholars learned about the rice-based fish pond from Kayanbayu and his son, and at the same time they cared about the progress of the village technical station, and gained a lot. Although Jinling learned the basic knowledge, in many cases, he only knew how powerful it was when he operated it. The location of the fish pond, the depth of the fish pond determined by the amount of water flow, the oxygen content of the water, the selection of fertilizers, the judgment of the state of rice, the species of fish, the supplement of fish feed. These are all very delicate jobs. You can't learn them clearly without someone to teach you. Kayanbayu and his neighbors also provided many failed cases for their reference. In some cases, the species of fish were mixed, and carnivorous fish mixed in, and ate all the other species. In some cases, the operation time of rice changed, resulting in a conflict between the time when rice needed water and the time when fish were raised, causing the rice to be drowned. There are also various strange ways to reduce production. Only by trying it yourself can you know that Li Yuan really didn't hide anything when teaching, and every technical detail was taught in detail. The construction of the technical station itself is even clearer. The two scholars didn't care much about the affairs of the hustle and bustle. They ate when they were given food, and wore when they were given clothes. For the first time, they knew that even a small organization of 2 or 3 people involved so many problems. It took a lot of effort to decide on the candidates. Everyone was greedy for this opportunity, and even the village chief didn't dare to act recklessly, as there were too many people watching. In the end, they combined the method of Mengerlang, which was relayed by Zinziake, and selected a few people who could read and speak well from all the people, and voted to decide 3 candidates and 2 backup candidates. Some people also wanted to bribe the villagers who voted, but they also had their own little tricks. The technicians came back to teach everyone how to farm and raise livestock. Everyone lived on a few acres of land, and the impact of more or less work was huge. What if the person sent out to learn technology was not suitable and could not explain what he learned clearly? Wouldn't that be a pitfall for himself? Therefore, the final decision may have been influenced by personal relationships and benefits, but it was not too much, and the unsuitable person must not be selected. Among the 3 people who were finally selected was Kayanbayu's son. Kayandalan came back to teach his father and neighbors after learning about rice-based fish ponds from the Huangseong experimental field. He taught well, did not hide anything, and explained clearly. He was really a suitable person. After the candidates were decided, there were division of labor issues. Who would keep the accounts? Who would write the monthly, quarterly, and annual monitoring, evaluation, and summary? Who would notify and call the villagers? How would the daily patrol shifts be arranged? Finally, after a lot of debate, things were roughly sorted out and officially started. There would be adjustments to be made. After this was decided, the relationship between the technical station and the villagers had to be adjusted. Yes, although the technical station is a good thing, it is not gold or silver, and not everyone loves it. There are many people in the village who look down on the technical station. There are people who are good at farming and cherish their own little things. They are not willing to let others learn better farming methods. There are idle ruffians who are greedy for the money and grain of the technical station and always have some crooked ideas. There are those who are plotting against the possible official positions and public grain money of the technical station in the future and want to squeeze them out and catch up. There are those who have large families, large businesses, and large populations, and want to collude with the technical station to monopolize the new technology. These are the unbearable messes, and there are also some minor ones, which are not so serious, but also make people unhappy. For example, some people want to use their connections to be the first to try something new. They don't want to eat alone, they want to be the first to try it. Some people also like the work of the technical station and want to take it over to increase their income. The bicycles, coal stoves, and meals used by the people in the technical station will not fall from the sky, so naturally someone will become a supplier. All these things are really troubling. Anyway, Zinziake and Oyuziake are really confused. They have always felt that they were not here to take care of these trivialities, but now they realize that unless they have a lot of money to hire someone to take care of things, these trivialities will really be their daily routine in the future. Chapter 393, Another Way to Get By. Meng Erlang had already experienced everything that Zinziake and Oyuziake had experienced, and the situation was much more bizarre. Qingshan City had developed quite well, and Li Ju's prestige was also very high, which meant that the intrigues in the villages below would be limited. The Port Chengyang Prefecture and Anglai Prefecture were different. The locals were buzzing around like flies seeing honey when they saw money. In addition, the local people were conservative, so those copies were at least difficult. The two scholars were skeptical when they listened to the class, always thinking that the people were ignorant and would not have so many schemes. It was not until this time that they were completely convinced by the teachers of Chengyang Prefecture. All the details and technical matters in the field were completed. It was already a month later. The village had harvested all the fish and crabs, and then the rice was harvested. After all these were done, it was already mid-October, and they had to pound rice, collect the final payment for selling fish and crabs, pay taxes and levies, and send some money and grain to the people's warehouses in the public. Although the work is more tedious, it is a joy to collect things into the money bag and warehouse. There are some very detailed things here. For example, only families with a large population can complete the work of pounding rice and shelling at home. If there are a little less manpower or more millet, they can only send it to the water-powered mill and have it shelled by the water-powered mill. The water-powered mill and water-powered mill in a place represent a lot of income. In the past, Princess Taiping in the Tang dynasty fought with others for the water-powered mill and even went to the court. In this village, the water-powered mill and water-powered mill are very important means of production and are currently controlled by a rich family. The rich family failed to send their useless son to the technical station, so they naturally had to embarrass the villagers here. Collecting money from selling fish and crabs is another very important matter. This year, the price of fish on the bus is 4 cents per catty, and the price of crabs on the bus varies from 3 to 6 cents per catty depending on the size. In fact, when the fish and crabs are delivered to the truck, the merchants who receive them will not pay immediately, but will delay the payment until 1 month, 1 quarter or even 1 year. Because the people and restaurants in the city who consume fish and crabs, as well as cloth, silk, chickens, ducks, pigs and sheep, also settle accounts regularly, it takes a certain amount of time for the merchants to collect the money. Moreover, after receiving the money, the merchants will calculate their own profits, use the money to lend, or do some other business to earn more, until they can no longer delay, and then they will come back to the villagers here. Once the transaction is on a large scale, the merchants will form a price alliance and divide the market. They are not afraid of the producers and farmers breaking the contract, so they will delay payment to earn more profits. Only temporary and scarce product transactions will be cash transactions. Obviously, the village where Kanbeihu is located has been monopolized by several merchants. If they don't sell to them, there will be no one else to sell to, so they have to endure the merchants' delay in payment. At the end of the year, they have to find a way to collect the payment for the goods. They have to urge them. If they don't urge them, the merchants can drag it out until next year. Debt collection is a technical job. Zinziake and Oyuziake no longer wanted to deal with money from merchants, but they had to learn it. The first time is a little bit of a stunt, and by the beginning of November, they were able to do it calmly. They were the last to return to the gathering place, and they were also the ones who learned the most carefully. The others were not perfunctory, but they were either children from the countryside, who were particularly familiar with village affairs, so they focused on the purely technical aspects that they were relatively unfamiliar with, or they had no intention of going to the village, and were determined to stay in the city, so they focused on the 3 major issues of money, grain, and people. The others who came with them had been waiting for them for a long time, but Shanyang is now also very developed, and Sima County Magistrate has governed it very well. Qingming is different from the freedom of Qingshan and the prosperity of Jinling. It has its own leisure and tranquility of a small person sandwiched between two giants. Shanyang plays a role of a major transportation route between Jinling and Qingshan. It collects tolls, runs post stations and tea stalls, makes some travel dishes that is food that does not spoil for a long time, and can be taken on the road when traveling far away, and builds several warehouses for express delivery and official postmen as transit stations, and can still live comfortably. There is a saying in Hua Hinan and Hua Ibri that young people do not go to Shanyang, because life in Shanyang is comfortable and there is no ambition. Even Wu County Magistrate, who has been a deputy driver in Shanyang for so long, has a wife, children and a prosperous business, and has not thought about the bad things in the capital for a long time. Therefore, the other 30 people from Yunmeng and Yunmeng waited here for Xinziake and Ouyuziake to meet up, and they did not feel that it was a waste of time. Although Shanyang County is not as wealthy as Qingshan and Jinling, it has other experiences to learn from. When they return to Wazhou Fanzhou, they will promote their own technology. There must be places where they cannot promote it. At that time, they can refer to Shanyang's methods. If it were any other prefecture, seeing the county towns and villages below develop well, they might even be jealous and secretly exclude them. But Shanyang here is very good and has no intention of competing with Qingshan. When Wu Bijia invited them to listen to the opera privately, he self-deprecatingly said that this was salted fish style, or the word summarized by Li Ju. He felt that it was quite suitable to describe the situation in Shanyang where everyone lay down and did not fight, or work hard. When everyone thought about it carefully, they felt that it was not a way of living. After all, there are limited people and wealth in the world, and the natural endowments of different places are definitely different. Do you want every place to keep pace? Don't dream. Naturally, there are places that are outstanding, and there are places that lag behind. Those outstanding places must attract strong labor and money and rice investment. How can other places compete with these outstanding places? What else can they do except lying down? It's better here like Shanyang. While lying down, they make money and feed the people. Everyone rested here for a few days, waited for the two scholars to arrive, and exchanged their experiences on the road. Only then did they reluctantly bid farewell to Wu Bijia and return to Jinling. This trip was wonderful. Not only did they make up for the shortcomings of their own practical experience, but they also saw with their own eyes that Li Ju's goodness was not only among the rich and nobles, nor was it only in towns like Qingshan and Jinling. His strategy also fell on every ordinary person, and really changed the fate of many people with nothing. According to the statistics of officials who are proficient in general affairs such as Zhao County Magistrate and Wu Bijia, after Li Ju came to Qingshan, at least 3 values were soaring: the survival rate of children, life expectancy and per capita income. In the past, people would throw away or secretly strangle children if they couldn't raise them. Now each family has more people to support, and those who really can't afford to raise them can also be quietly sent to the poor relief, where at least the children can grow up. After people became weak, they died early due to malnutrition, illness, and injury and lack of medical treatment. Now at least they have better nutrition and stronger bodies, and they can still afford 2 doses of medicine when they really get sick. All this relies on the increase in family income, government income and the improvement of local doctors' medical skills. At this point, people no longer doubt the significance of Li's technical station system. They only worry about whether they will have acclimatization problems after moving to their own homes. Everyone has this doubt, but Li Ju, Meng Erlang and others are very optimistic. As the saying goes, things will naturally go smoothly when they reach the bridgehead. It is useless to worry here. Problems will only be exposed in practice. Even when Li Ju himself suddenly started to build the Chengyang Prefecture Technical Station, he also experienced some twists and turns before he found Yu Yaoniang and Meng Erlang, 2 local snakes, to settle local relations. Chapter 394 New Situation. The envoys of Yunmeng and Erdao have entered the internship stage. After the general knowledge foundation, adapting to local conditions, and observing, there are practical courses, and the starting point of the practical course is internship. Internship means being sent to work at existing technical stations. Ouyuziake and Xinziake, 2 envoys, have actually been there before, and this is the second time. They are divided into groups of 3 or 4, with at least 2 people in each group, who are skilled in martial arts and boxing. They are sent to technical points, in Jinling and nearby villages, and directly work as technicians at technical points. At this time, the envoys of Lingnan, Lingbei, and Huobi also arrived, just in time to start a new round of general education courses. The people in Yansao have just finished the technical course of adapting to local conditions, and were sent to a nearby flower garden to study greenhouse management. Even Yang Dalang is no exception, but he went to the Yu family's flower garden, and brought 6 books of high school mathematics and high school physics, that Li Ju had refined. Yang Dalang felt that he saw heaven in the books, given by Li Ju. Whether it is heaven or not is another matter, but Li Ju also saw hope here. Although the people sent by each province have to go through a lot before the candidates are determined, at least there are 16 people in each province, who can go back to spread new knowledge. Considering that the scope of selection for each road is so large, Li Ju thinks it is good that more than a dozen people who are willing to come can be selected. Especially for Yang Dalang, who comes from a prominent family, plays an important role among his peers, and is also a talented teenager. Outstanding juniors are often regarded as direct heirs by their masters, their fathers, and their ancestors, but the Yang family let him come to Jinling to study in Lian. His appearance vaguely represents Yang Mengxin's will, and also indicates that there are people in the next generation, who are looking forward to Li Ju. Although Yang Dalang's identity is a bit special, and he is a spoiled young man, he still works in the fields like everyone else. In the past 6 months, his body has also become stronger, and it seems that the dullness has also decreased a little, and he is more like a silly boy from a farm. Such Yang Dalang and Wu Niang are more like a couple. Wu Niang is full of wildness. Yang Dalang had a strong nerdy temperament before, but now, it is just right. When Yunnan celebrated his birthday, Yang Dalang came back from outside to celebrate. Old Mr. Yu almost didn't recognize him and asked, "Whose brother is this? He has a good physique." Wu Niang laughed so hard that she couldn't straighten her waist. This year is Yunnan's 84th birthday. It is a special year, and he is a long-lived man. All the famous people in Jiangnan came to congratulate him. Liu Yu, Li Ju, Cheng Guiyang, and the 3rd prince came in person. The famous people in Jinling, Huanan, and Huobi, such as Huang Zhi, basically went to celebrate the birthday in person. Xia Taishao and Liu Zhang in Lingbei also sent their confidants to congratulate. The 2nd prince in Guanzhang and the eldest prince in Ludong also had their own officials and chief historians rushing to congratulate. Yu Fu is the next head of the Yu family designated by Yunnan, and he welcomes and sees off guests on behalf of his father. Yujin helps his brother inside and outside as his deputy. The eldest son, 2nd son, 3rd son, 4th son, aunt, 2nd daughter, 3rd daughter and husband, and Fuji Yui and his wife, who rushed back from other places, helped out and took the opportunity to get some connections. Yu Fu will take care of the old house and ancestral property of the Yu family in Jiangnan, while Yujin will continue to venture into the capital after the family splits up. Fuji Yui has already participated in the imperial examination, and the results will be announced in the next few days. If he passes the exam, Yujin will take Fuji Yui to the capital, and Fuji Yui will go to the capital to study and take exams. In addition, he will serve as a station for Li Ju in the capital. Li Ju himself had no idea about the latter matter. It was after Yunnan proposed it that Fuji Yui volunteered to take it. Yunnan felt that Li Ju's stall was big and his steps were fast, so he might be a fat piece of meat or a thorn in the eyes of others. Because he admired Li Ju's actions, he had always personally come forward to protect Li Ju. In the past 2 years, Yunnan gradually couldn't protect him. After all, when people are away from the center of political power, their words are inevitably not enough. Moreover, Li Ju slowly touched upon the core rights of some people. It was difficult for those who were neutral before to remain neutral. Li Ju had no business in the capital, so it was difficult for him to move. At the same time, the emperor was getting older, and the empress in the central palace had no legitimate son and had delayed the succession. The aging of an emperor meant that he would become gentle and suspicious. It also meant that he and his children were about to have a cruel struggle. Now the youngest of the emperor's 6 children has gone to school, and the oldest will get married this winter. He also married, and took in 4 at once. The marriages of the second and third princes were also on the table. It was said that the second prince's wife had been chosen, and the wife, Yu Yaoniang, had been taken away by the empress to be raised. Li Ju was rich and talented, and was the younger generation chosen by the emperor, but he had no family power, and no wife's family, to take care of him. He was like a child with a rare treasure. If he was not careful, he would become cannon fodder in the struggle for imperial power. Li Ju himself was a fool. He was unwilling to use his marriage to tie back her, and he was unwilling to stand with the top wealthy families in the capital. Although he has a friendship with the prince, it is better not to have that friendship. He can still be a loyal minister without a friendship, but who knows how he will be arranged with a friendship. Yunnan had to think more about him. Fuji Yui is Li Ju's disciple and the son-in-law of the Yu family, although he is not a son-in-law who lives with his wife, because the Fu family is not well off. He is only a formal title away from being a son-in-law. In short, he is a very good candidate. This person is also particularly shrewd and smooth. He knows how to judge the situation, and does not flatter blindly. He is good at common affairs, and has a deep understanding of human nature. He is handsome, and has good conversation. He is a good candidate to be sent to make friends with officials. Fuji Yui himself is also very willing. He is not the kind of noble and arrogant scholar. As long as he can achieve his goal, he dares to use any means. In the past 2 years, it is because Li Ju and Yui have assimilated by example, and Huang Zhi and Yu Fu have restrained him by words and deeds, so he has not gone astray. Now, if we measure him with various yardsticks, we can see that he is a standard pragmatic bureaucratic hexagonal warrior. The bigger the stage and the more audiences he has, the more excited he is. When Yunnan mentioned it to Li Ju said that he would only see what Fugai thought. Fuji Yui immediately clasped his fists and accepted the order. I'm willing to go. The kingdom of Jinling was half won by Sister Zhao, and the kingdom of the north will be left to me. Yunnan raised his hand and hit him on the head with a book. You are speaking like a traitor. Do you know that? Don't say it again. You are not allowed to say it as long as your master and your wife are around. Li Ju saw that he had chosen the most difficult path, so he didn't persuade him. Fuji Yui was half for power and half for Li Ju's career. As a vested interest, what else could he be dissatisfied with? In that case, go ahead. When you and the second master go to the capital after the new year, you must be careful and cautious, and protect yourself first. Don't force yourself to do anything that you can't do. Don't be afraid to spend money. I'll give you as much as you can, but don't do anything that goes against your conscience. It's good for you and your wife to do this. Li Ju was implying that Fuji Yui was very scheming. For example, his marriage with Yui was arranged by him taking the initiative. Li Ju didn't object to this kind of scheming, but he hoped that Fuji Yui would not go astray and use this scheming to get things done. Fuji Yui has been very good to his wife since he attached himself to the Yu family, so he can still be considered a good person. Fuji Yui said remember repeatedly, saluted Yunnan, and stood up again, his eyes full of desire to fight. Chapter 395, The flag that shouldn't be raised is raised. Chapter 386 Yunnan's birthday banquet was very grand, but those who were close to the Yu family could see that the Yu family had undergone some major adjustments after this birthday banquet. Yu Fu returned to Jinling, and Yu Jin handed over all his business to his brother. After that, Yu Fu was in charge of most of the affairs of the Yu family. Everyone respectfully called Yu Fu the master, and the young men of the Yu family were called young masters. Old Master Yu also divided his personal property. From the eldest son to the little great-grandson of Yu Yaoniang, each descendant received a sum of property, and some was given to the old ancestral hall of the Yu family, which was considered confiscated. From then on, the old man only cared about eating, drinking, gambling, and watching plays, and no longer cared about the right and wrong outside. Yunnan arranged his affairs after his death, and everyone was not surprised. He was in a coma last winter, and it was only his servant who learned Li Yuan's 3 first aid methods for the elderly that saved him. Last year's New Year was a bit tangled, so it was reasonable to make arrangements this year. In addition, after obtaining the consent of Sanjiu and her daughter, Xiaolian and Yusen Shaoi's marriage was also put on the agenda. They will be married in November, but they will not have sex until Xiaolian turns 18. Although the time has been advanced, the preparations for the wedding have been going on, so this wedding is also lively. Zhao Sanjiu has prepared countless fields, houses, and industries for his daughter. It can be said that except for the most important things for Li Ju, such as textiles, etc., Sanjiu gave everything else to his daughter. Although Xiaolian is young, she is more experienced than most older people, and has been helping Sanjiu manage the industry for a long time. Her unique vision and comprehensive handling of things are no worse than Sanjiu, and far better than the straightforward and unpretentious Yaoniang and others. Li Ju also prepared a dowry for Xiaolian in the capacity of adoptive father. In addition to cash, headwear, cloth, jewelry, there is a cart of books, including astronomy and geography books. This cart of books is what Xiaolian values most, and is also the favorite of the Yu family. Princess Chengyang secretly gave Xiaolian a makeup. She gave her a land deed and a farm. She bought the farm closest to the Yu family from the local government, and gave it to Xiaolian for her makeup. The farm itself is very delicate and small, which is very suitable for Xiaolian to enjoy in the future. This is one reason. The farm represents Chengyang's protection of Xiaolian, which is another reason. Chengyang didn't know when she would have to leave for Beijing. At that time, she would no longer be able to make peace for the people in Jiangnan, and could only leave some incense and affection to help shock them. Chengyang had already added, and the third prince was embarrassed not to add. He had other ideas. If it really worked out, Xiaolian would be considered half his daughter. Unfortunately, the third prince was very poor and did not bring any treasures with him when he went out on business. He was also unwilling to plunder from the local area and was even more unwilling to give Xiaolian the filial piety of others. The precious things around him were all men's supplies, not suitable for makeup. After thinking about it, the third prince finally drew a picture album for Xiaolian, which was the novel things he saw along the way. There are not only exotic flowers and plants, birds and beasts, but also human feelings and the unique colors of mountains and rivers. Xiaolian only traveled around Qingshan and Jinling, but she, like her mother, was a woman with ambitions, so she should be allowed to see the scenery outside. With so much added pressure, in the end, Qingshan Li married her daughter to Jinling Yu, and it was not an exaggeration to say that the whole city was sent off with a 10-mile red macup. Even though Xiaolian was still young, considering the health and wishes of Volju, Zhao Sanjiu had to send his daughter off in tears. After Xiaolian got married, even if the Yu family was open-minded and indulgent, Sanjiu had fewer opportunities to see her daughter, and she couldn't help feeling empty. Even though the cats, dogs, and white geese raised by Li Ju were all around Sanjiu, Sanjiu was still visibly confused for a while. Time will not stop for anyone. Before Sanjiu could adjust her mood, the third prince secretly asked her to discuss important matters. Sanjiu was still an official of Li Ju, and thought that the third prince was about to leave, and wanted to talk to her about the relationship between the two families, so she relaxed, and met the third prince in the book house next to the school. But she didn't expect that after the greeting, the third prince blushed and tried to propose marriage. Sanjiu always thought that the third prince was different from the first prince. The first prince was really fond of beauty, and the third prince was a little silly, but he had an extraordinary vision, and could see the suffering of ordinary people in order to survive. Although they were different, being a concubine to the prince was not something Sanjiu considered. So Sanjiu refused without a second thought. Thank you for your love, your highness, but please forgive me for being so bold. I will never be a concubine in my life. A woman has to obey her father at home, and her husband after marriage. There are already enough rules and regulations. I'm a free countryman and I don't want to have a wife to pressure me. The eldest prince retreated because of this condition. Sanjiu tried the same trick again, but the third prince was much more reckless than his brother. Sister Sanjiu, do you take your words seriously? Sanjiu smiled and said, of course I take it seriously. Can I lie to you? Your highness is a prince, and he condescends to serve me, and treats me as his wife with 120% sincerity. How can I not appreciate it? The third prince also smiled, his eyes full of light. "Don't worry, sister. I will tell my father and mother about this. When I go back, I will ask to marry you no matter what. If you don't want to be a concubine, then don't be a concubine. Even if my father issues an order, I dare not disobey it. I think I'm just a farmer prince who works in the fields. My marriage is not as important as that of my elder and second brothers. I should be able to do what I want." Sanjiu heard him speak seriously, so he also said half seriously and half exaggeratedly, "Your highness is modest. Your highness is noble. I can't say anything nonsense. But your highness is different from others. I admire you very much." The third prince scratched his head stupidly. He was still very proud of being praised by Sanjiu. Although he didn't know how he was different from others, Sanjiu would not be wrong. If Sanjiu said so, he would be so. Regardless of whether it was true or not, the third prince got Sanjiu's personal promise, and then he went back to find Li Ju and told Li Ju about it. The officials who wanted to marry Li Ju naturally had to be told. "We have to give Li Ju enough time to find another subordinate." Li Ju was surprised when he first heard it, but after listening to the details, he could tell that Sanjiu was trying to shirk his responsibility. He also felt that the third prince would never get the emperor's marriage no matter what, so he agreed easily. Li Ju knew that Sanjiu was a very good person, but the Sanjiu in front of the people of Daean was a widow whose husband had died. She was always in the limelight, did not follow the rules, and had worked as a slave and a businessman. In terms of status alone, if Li Ju hadn't helped, Sanjiu would have been the second lowest among all people. It's not that no one wants to marry Sanjiu, but those people only look at her beauty, money, and connections, hoping to suck her blood after marrying her. The special status of the third prince extremely limits the scope of his marriage. No matter how much the emperor likes widows, his queen is not a widow of commoner origin. Li Ju didn't believe that the third prince could get the imperial decree to marry Sanjiu as his principal wife, so he readily agreed and even joked with the third prince, "Is this the Yulao temple? Whenever there is a capable arm, it will be taken away within 3 years. Old Wu married the director of the first textile factory, which delayed my factory for more than half a year. The Yu family married the female principal of the school that I liked, and I don't know where to find a replacement. You know, director, he is still available, but when will there be another genius like Xiaolian? Now, my only arm who knows me well and can do things properly is snatched away by you. If you don't compensate me with a comparable one, I won't let him go." The third prince replied, "How can you argue? Even if I'm searching for gold in the sand, I will definitely find a few satisfactory ones for you, brother. Just wait for me." Chapter 396 Agreement. The time for the third prince to return to Beijing has been set. He will leave before the new year and arrive in Beijing just in time to celebrate the queen's birthday. Chen Guiyang did not go back with him. No one in Beijing urged her, so she pretended to have forgotten about it and was still in Jinling offering sacrifices to her ancestors. He did not return without a return. The gifts for the 3 festivals and 2 birthdays were never short. This time, he also asked his younger brother to bring back a lot of local rituals. Among the 3 princes, Li Ju spent the longest time with the third prince and had the best relationship with him. He and Chen Guiyang sent him to the Tenli pavilion outside the city. The third prince felt that the important matter had been settled. He happily said goodbye to his 2 brothers and sisters and got on his horse and left. His horse's hooves were fast when he came, and his heart was light when he left. Seeing his younger brother's escort team disappear from afar, Chen Guiyang and Li Ju turned their horses' heads and walked back. On the way, Chen Guiyang asked, "What did you promise him? He kept asking you not to go back on your word." Li Ju looked at Sanjiu, who was riding a horse with a flower braid next to him. Sanjiu laughed and said, "The master didn't promise anything to your highness. It was me." Chen Guiyang understood immediately. "Did he ask you for marriage?" Sanjiu laughed, "Not really, just testing the waters." Chen Guiyang and Sanjiu were good friends. Although Sanjiu didn't say it clearly, she guessed 80% of what she meant. She knew that she must have used the same method she had used to reject the eldest prince to reject the third prince. Sanjiu and Li Ju didn't think the third prince could meet Sanjiu's requirements, but Chen Guiyang didn't think so. Her 2 younger brothers were different. Now the capital was busy selecting concubines for the second and third brothers as wives. Maybe the third prince could really make it happen. Yu Yaoniang took a closer look at Zhao Sanjiu, who was wearing a men's military uniform for riding a horse. Men's martial arts uniforms have stiff lines and bright colors. Yu Yaoniang has a calm appearance. Dressing like this will make him look more androgynous and heroic. Sanjiu looks more charming and gorgeous. The cold and masculine style actually highlights Sanjiu's soft appearance. She is such a beautiful girl. No one can resist her. It's no wonder that her two brothers have fallen. But this time, Sanjiu may be the one to fall, but it's not that she has fallen. Her brothers know that the third brother is reliable and may not be a bad man. Yu Yaoniang smiled and said, then let's make a deal first. If my brother really does what you ask of him, you can't go back on your word and you have to call me sister. When have I ever gone back on my word? Sanjiu didn't take it to heart at all. It seems as if what your highness said can really come true. There are so many good girls in the world. How could I, a man surrounded by right and wrong, dare to think about these things? But our master, at this age, still, Li Ju, who had been watching the show silently on the side, heard that the war was coming to him, and hurriedly patted as a twice and flew out. There seems to be a rapeseed field growing well ahead. The mute and I will go take a look first. You guys take your time and don't fall. Sanjiu and Yu Yaoniang laughed muffledly. Sanjiu even shouted from a distance, hey, why are you running so fast? I'm not a tiger. Can I eat you? Li Ju ran even faster. The two of them and their horses ran as if they were fleeing in panic. Yu Yaoniang laughed out loud beside them. From Yunnan's birthday to the departure of the third prince to return to Chang'an, Li Yuan was very busy. At least they rested for 4 or 5 days and resumed classes in November. Li Ju's life was back on track. Others took the general knowledge, basics, and practical introductions, and he mainly dealt with the subject of adapting to local conditions. If there was a genius like Yang Daling, Li Ju would discuss and learn with him personally. In addition to classes, the rest was to organize the available technologies, take care of the experimental fields, and copy books. He moved here, but Dayan Club did not move here, and it was still in Kingshan City. It's not that they don't want to come, but Kingshan City now gathers too many beggars in the fashion and entertainment industry, just like the entertainment capital. But Dayan Club is not easy to move. Yunnan completely retired here, put down everything, and gave the rest of his life to the family troupe raised by the Yu family. The actors and actresses raised by the Yu family are all outstanding people. The previous Kyan Han was a little older and changed to singing opera, and she could sing and become the leading actor in Jiangnan. You can see how good her foundation is. Yanan likes Li Ju's plays very much. Knowing that Dayan Club didn't come, he gave half of his family troupe to Li Ju. Li Ju has been copying Ngao Mao and Shiwuguan these days. Neither story is auspicious. Li Ju is interested in the admonition behind them. The technical station relies too much on local officials. Li Ju needs to plant a little fire in people's hearts. But the play for Yanan can't be so vulgar. Yanan likes extremely elegant literary plays. Li Ju copied a book Peach Blossom Fan for Yanan, which has extremely exquisite lyrics and music. Peach Blossom Fan is more unlucky than Ngao Mao, but Li Ju also argued that this is to learn from history, see how other countries have fallen, and think about how to keep his own country prosperous. Especially the set of Lamenting Jiangnan, which must be sung until old. The laid rice outside has been harvested, which is the slack season for farming. The wooden track road that was delayed due to busy farming has begun to be built again. The part that was repaired in the previous summer has been put into use, and the effect is very good at present. The increase in freight volume means a bigger market. Road construction, maintenance, driving, raising livestock, veterinary medicine, cleaning livestock manure, providing food and accommodation along the way. A lot of new jobs have been put online, supporting many people who were once unable to make a living. During this slack season, Li Ju has not yet introduced incentives to mobilize people to repair wooden rail cars, and most places can't wait to start on their own. The matter of repairing the track also fell into the eyes of the 6 envoys who were studying in Lian. Although it seems simple to repair the road, there are many intrigues in it, which can also teach them a lesson. The simplest one is how to calculate the wages of hitchhikers who are just filling in the numbers, and then what to do when encountering village tyrants who threaten to tear up the tracks during road construction, and where to set up the stations, how to arrange the working time of livestock. These are all details which open the eyes of people who have never lived at the bottom before. The vigorous construction has been the theme of Dayang, especially in Jiangnan in the past 2 or 3 years. The track between the gate of the capital and the ferry is also under construction. The people of the capital were more generous, with the emperor taking the lead. Other families donated money and mines to please his majesty. Therefore, the track from the ferry to the city gate was paved with two-way 4-lane roads, with a solid foundation and a layer of iron sheet on the outside. It was not that they did not want to use all iron and all steel tracks, but that all iron and all steel tracks were too heavy and would sink in a minute. They did not have time to ask Li Ju for the reason, or they did not want to ask, so they used iron sheeting for the transition. When the first section of track was paved and used for the train, the whole city was in an uproar, and many noble sons and daughters ran to watch the excitement. Tai Fu Yang and Aksushi Wu, who almost tore their faces with Li Ju in public, could not control their own girls, and finally let Yanqing, Wu Shanqing and a bunch of rich daughters and daughters go to watch. Yanqing was so brave that she drove the carriage around herself. Before she got off the carriage, she shouted, "It's amazing. It's very light. Sister, you should try it too. You will definitely like it." Chapter 397 Selection. Yanqing ran back and forth twice and was able to stop and start the train skillfully. She also took Wu Shanqing and other buddies to shake it up. After they got off the train, they gathered together and chatted about why the rail cars were light and fast, and even mules and horses were not easy to stop. However, they had hardly studied Li Yuan science systematically, so naturally they discussed it endlessly, but there was no reasonable explanation. It was not until the eldest daughter of the Guangxi Shen family who participated in the selection this year explained in a soft voice, "It's because the friction has decreased." Yanqing was a widow, and Wu Shanqing and other buddies of hers were all married and had children. They had little to say to the young girls who had just entered Beijing for selection this year, but they knew some rumors and stories, and were not very familiar with other things. So until Miss Shen took the initiative to explain, they realized that some of the girls in the selection had already studied Li Zu in depth. Miss Shen's mother, Ma, was the beloved daughter of a wealthy merchant in the West. She married the eldest son of the Shen family, a Confucian family in Guangxi. Her dowry alone included 4 high-quality horse farms, countless gold, silver, treasures, land, and slaves, not to mention the property that Ma had already controlled before she got married. This wealth immediately revitalized the Shen family, which was only noble, but could hardly pay monthly wages. However, the Shen family was a typical family that was arrogant and self-important. They used Ma's dowry to support their dignity, but despised Ma for being the daughter of a merchant. They tried to suppress Ma with their conservative rules and plunder her. Unexpectedly, Ma had been managing the family business since she was 12 years old. By the time she got married at the age of 24, she had been maneuvering in Guangxi, the western regions, and Suai for more than 10 years. How could a few scholars suppress her with family rules? Money, food, people, fields, and shops were all dominated by Ma. When the two sides tore each other apart, Ma almost never squeezed the Shen family out of Guangxi, which showed how vicious and cruel she was. Now Ma and her husband live in separate houses. Her husband Shenzi married a second wife and treated the second wife as his grandmother, as if Ma didn't exist. Ma didn't bother to care. Anyway, no matter how Shenzi struggled, without Ma's support, he was the last ray of light of a declining family, and he only interacted with some sour Confucian scholars. Ma had a son and a daughter. The eldest daughter, Shen Qianjun, was only 18 years old. She was born petite, intelligent, gentle, and considerate. Miss Shen was talented and had a very cunning vision. She had learned Ma's methods since she was a child. I'm afraid that 10 men are not as good as her. Because His Majesty the Emperor ordered the selection of the second, third, and fourth princes, Miss Shen took the initiative to ask Ma to send her to participate in the selection, and she came to the capital. Miss Shen's appearance is very deceptive. She doesn't have a gorgeous and aggressive feeling, nor is she pitiful and weak. Instead, she looks a bit like Princess Yu Yaoniang and has a kind of stretched generosity. The candidates who successfully passed the levels and reached the last level were all taught by the queen. Because Miss Shen was similar to Yu Yaoniang in some ways, Her Majesty treated her a little more attentively. With such an identity and such means, the taciturn Miss Shen always had a strong sense of existence. This was the first time she took the initiative to talk about something that no one could discuss. Yaoniang asked, "Friction? The one in mechanics? Wow, you even know this. You must have read a lot of 100 schools of miscellaneous studies, right? That is, in order to do a good business, listening to 6 directions and watching all directions are basic requirements, and understanding every business opportunity is an advanced requirement." Miss Shen learned these 2 courses very well. As soon as Li Yuan's various theories appeared, she realized that the general trend was difficult to defy, and she learned Li Yuan's things at the speed of light. Later, the new machines that Li Ju made were bought by Mars first in Guangdong and Guangxi. Now the textile industry in Guangxi is suppressed by Mars. Only some smart people in Guangdong also ordered machines, barely competing with Mars. Miss Shen looked normal, but in fact, she had already mastered the wealth of a region. Miss Shen smiled and explained, "I'm bored all day long. There's nothing fun to do in our place with yellow sand and dry grass. I can only watch these to relieve my boredom." Miss Shen looked calm, with only a little nervousness and shyness caused by speaking in public. These were just her pretending. Miss Shen, who looked shy, was already thinking about how to move this rail transit to Guangxi and monopolize it for a while. Yaoniang and others didn't think too much and surrounded Miss Shen, asking her to explain the reasoning in detail. Miss Shen didn't refuse and talked about Newton's first law of motion with the carriages and horses running above. The performance of the ladies was noticed by those who were interested. They were all girls in their teens and early 20s. No matter how cautious they were, they had to have a limit. After a long time, they would inevitably forget themselves. Her Majesty the Queen, the birth mother of the 3rd prince, and the birth mother of the 4th prince, Gao Ziyi, saw everything. The Queen had a few favorites in her heart. She wrote down the appearance and character of these girls, and chose a suitable day to communicate with His Majesty the Emperor. The day had to be neither too hot nor too cold, neither too stuffy nor too dry. There was nothing going on in the court and the harem was safe. Then His Majesty the Emperor would be willing to listen to her selection slowly. If he thought it was okay, he would arrange for the 2 families to get to know each other. Since Yu Yaoniang and the young man from the Yang family had a divorce, His Majesty the Emperor had been much more indulgent about the marriages of his children. The eldest prince was granted a marriage, and he was also arranged to meet the young ladies who were granted marriages, so as to avoid creating a few more resentful couples. Among the people the Queen pointed out was Miss Lin, the daughter of the headmaster of the first academy in Jiangnan, who came from a family of scholars for generations, and whose background was many generations thicker than that of the Shen family in Guangxi. Although the Queen was partial to Miss Shen, she still liked Miss Lin the most. Miss Lin looked picky and stubborn, and she was always complaining about everything, but she had a very good temper. She had the same talent as her father. Unfortunately, Miss Lin is still young, just 15 years old. Shan's Hanglin was afraid that his daughter would marry too early, so he specifically begged his senior brother, the Emperor, to let him keep his daughter until she was 20. Therefore, the Queen saw Miss Lin as the son of the 4th prince or rather similar families. In addition, there is the granddaughter of General Luo, a general's daughter, with a very straightforward temperament and low emotional intelligence that Miss Shen can't lead, but she is a very upright person, and the Queen likes to get along with her very much. Fortunately, this girl will never stir up trouble, and she can also make those who stir up trouble suffer losses. With her mediating, they think that there will be fewer problems for the brothers in the future. Then there is Miss Shen, who is rich and watertight. The Queen thought about introducing her to the 3rd prince. After talking about Miss Shen's personality and merits, the Queen revealed her intention, and the Emperor waved his hand and said, "Sanlang is gentle and not cunning. She is not suitable. I have other arrangements for this girl. You don't have to worry about her." The Queen deliberately said, "Other arrangements? Dalong can't make it. Could it be that Your Majesty wants to keep her in the palace?" The emperor coughed and said, "You are just fooling around. You are about to hold your grandson, and you are still making trouble. I'm here for Marquis Fengrang. Marquis Fengrang needs a confidant. I think since this girl can learn his books thoroughly, she must be like-minded with him. He will have nothing to say." The queen smiled and said, "I'm afraid not. Is a confidant of Marquis Fengrang just someone who reads books with him? There are so many girls in his school, but he doesn't like any of them. I have a different idea about this matter. I'll talk about it after I choose a son-in-law for the second and third princesses. But I know that the girl from the Shen family is too cunning. It is because the third daughter is dull and honest that she deserves a smart wife. People say that a clever wife accompanies a clumsy husband. Your Majesty, do you think this is true?" The emperor pondered for a few seconds, then suddenly raised his eyebrows and glared, and tapped the book. "Okay, are you saying that I'm a clumsy husband? Then let's talk about it. You are clever, but how am I clumsy? If we don't figure it out, the day will not end." The old couple burst into laughter and temporarily put aside the matter of the concubines. Chapter 398 Mother and Daughter. Regarding the arrangement of the marriage, there would always be some hints before it was finalized. After various hints and reminders, the marriage that the emperor and empress preferred was gradually passed on to everyone under the arrangement of the empress. Without being clearly stated or issued an order, people would understand it on their own. In this way, if there is anything inappropriate, it can be changed without losing face. The headmaster of the Lin family and his wife met with the fourth prince in private, and both sides were pleased. Although the fourth prince is young, he has a good personality and appearance. His mother, Gao Ziyi, also comes from a scholarly family, but not a prominent one. She herself is cautious and does not like to show off. Although she is not very favored, she is not neglected and is not the type to cause trouble. His Majesty the Emperor proposed that the fourth prince follow Headmaster Lin to study for a few years, and he seemed to be happy to see Miss Lin and the fourth prince childhood sweethearts. Headmaster Lin only has this daughter, and he loves her like a treasure, so he agreed to this matter regardless of the rules and regulations. If the two sides are satisfied with each other, everything will be easy to handle. However, the other two have many shortcomings. Miss Luo is a young lady who was raised by the emperor and empress. She is a little indulgent in her actions. She did not understand the hint, but her mother understood. The emperor and empress really love Miss Luo, so they want her to be the second prince's principal wife, and a princess in the future. Miss Luo herself doesn't care. Whether it is a second prince or other princes, they can't beat her at all. At most, they can live separately. What is there for her to worry about? Luo's mother was so angry at her careless daughter and husband that she had a heart attack, but she had to bite the bullet and go to the queen to plead for mercy in private. It was said that Miss Luo's character was too fierce, and she was worried that she would lose the face of the royal family in the future. In fact, she was unwilling to marry the second prince. It was not because she looked down on the second prince's humble mother's family, but simply because she didn't like the second prince's deep scheming. Others can be deceived by the second prince, but people like Luo's mother who are born as concubines in a big family should not be too sensitive. Their Luo family is a general family with military power, and their daughter is a Sicilian tigress. If she meets a handsome man like the second prince, she might be cheated into being squeezed for oil. This is just one bad thing. There is another one. Their Luo family does not want to be involved in the future turmoil. There are not many families who still have military power, and the Luo family is the leader. It is true that his family has the trust of His Majesty the Emperor, but no one dares to challenge the reliability of this trust. Luo's mother put the first meaning on the surface, that is, her daughter is too timid, and the third meaning is that she dare not get too close to the brothers and children of His Majesty the Emperor, waiting for Her Majesty the Queen to find out. The second meaning is that they think the second prince is too smart, and they dare not marry their daughter. The vigilance dare not show any signs. That's the prince. Dare to dislike the prince. Are you going to die? I don't know if the queen really didn't see it, or pretended not to see it for the sake of the friendship between the monarch and the ministers. Anyway, after Luo's mother cried and explained the pros and cons, Her Majesty the Queen did withdraw her plan to let Miss Luo be the second prince's consort. However, if Miss Shen, who ranked third in the queen's heart, was to be chosen as the consort of the second prince, her status would be a little embarrassing. As the eldest daughter of the Shen family, her status was not bad, but the Shen family had become increasingly decadent in recent years. It was really embarrassing that no one in the scholarly family had passed the imperial examination for 2 generations. Moreover, it was well known that Ma and her husband were separated and divorced. Although the crime was not committed by the children, it was inevitable that people would first suspect Miss Shen's character. Miss Shen's temperament was simple and smart, and her wealth, coupled with the scheming of the second prince, always felt that there was something missing. Therefore, this matter was put on hold. Anyway, there were plenty of ladies, and they could take their time to choose. In view of the fact that His Majesty the Emperor took the initiative to mention that he wanted to choose a marriage partner for Li Ju from the concubines, Her Majesty the Queen had to consider Li Ju and Chen Guiyang, who were far away in Jiangnan. Originally, they also planned to choose a son-in-law for the princesses after the marriages for the princes and clansmen were completed. It was not too early to consider it now. The difficulty was how Her Majesty the Queen should bring up this matter. Chen Guiyang was hiding it herself, Li Ju hadn't figured it out at all, and His Majesty the Emperor hadn't thought about it at all. The Queen was really afraid that, if she brought it up, Chen Guiyang would back off, Li Ju would refuse, and His Majesty the Emperor would say, what kind of nonsense is this, and the matter would be completely ruined. But if she wanted to make a long-term plan, she was afraid that there would not be enough time. Chen Guiyang didn't follow the third prince back to the capital, and His Majesty the Emperor was already annoyed enough. He was afraid that he would summon her back in the spring of next year. If the matter was not settled by then, Chen Guiyang was in the capital, and Li Ju was in the south of the Yangtze River. It was a long journey, and even if the matchmaker was the matchmaker, they should have broken off the relationship. What should she say? Her Royal Highness the Queen thought of her daughter, and first cursed the mother and son of the Yang family in her heart. Her daughter was once the most dazzling pearl in Chang'an, lively and cheerful, gentle and virtuous, brave and patient. Just because she married the wrong person once, she had to flee to the south of the Yangtze River, and from then on she lived in seclusion. All matters had to be carefully arranged, and she couldn't attract the attention of others, for fear of attracting criticism. His Majesty the Emperor had many conflicts with old ministers, aristocratic families, and prominent families. The atmosphere became a little subtle. Once the divorced Chen Guiyang appeared in front of people, she would be a living target. Otherwise, why should she be so cautious? In the entanglement and resentment of the Queen, time finally came to the end of this year. It was another year of good weather and good harvests. Most places had a good year. The court also provided disaster relief for the few small-scale disasters, and people could live a full year in peace and happiness. The sea transportation opened by Dingbo Port has gradually seen returns. The farthest fleet has landed in Kushan, south of the Nanyang. Spices, seeds, grain, gold, silver, jewelry. 10 times or even 100 times the profit has prompted people to turn their attention to maritime trade, which objectively promoted the development of handicrafts, industry and related technological progress. In addition, people who pursued profits will tilt the source of their profits to trade, which has virtually reduced the exploitation of agriculture and farmers. Thanks to the new assessment requirements of His Majesty the Emperor for the maritime trade areas, all places, especially Lingbai Road, are increasingly inclined to use commercial taxes to subsidize agriculture. Therefore, this year can be said to be the most prosperous year for the vast number of poor people since the founding of Dayang. People excitedly discussed this year's harvest, bought 2 more feet of increasingly cheap dyed floral cloth, bought flowers for their wives and children, bought a piece of Kingshan soap at home to make washing clothes and hands and faces cleaner, added a livestock, and raised 2 more chickens and ducks. When leaving, they saw that people's lives were difficult, and when returning, they were full of smiles. What the third prince saw when he returned to Beijing was very different from what he saw when he left Beijing. Thinking carefully, all kinds of changes are closely related to Kingshan Li Ju. So he was farther away from Jinling, but his yearning for it was stronger. After finally getting off the boat at the ferry in Beijing, he could see everything, and the ferry was different. 4 railway tracks stretched to the end of the road, and a station was built next to the ferry. Horse-drawn and mule-drawn carts were carrying goods in and out of the station. The men, porters, and helpers were busy changing animals and loading and unloading goods. The station was very lively. There were many naughty children on both sides of the track, chasing the speeding mule-drawn and horse-drawn carts in and out of the station. If there were not a few staff members blocking the platform fence, a few of them might have been knocked down. The official from the Ministry of Internal Affairs who came to greet the third prince saw that the third prince was staring at the rail car and asked with a smile, "Your Highness, our rail car has only been installed for a few days. If you want to give it a try, why don't we just change the horse-drawn carriage and take this rail car into the city?" The eunuch who had followed the third prince all the way said, "Our third prince just came back from Jinling and he has taken this a lot, so he doesn't think it's rare. If there is any arrangement, just go first. It's getting late, and you should report to His Majesty and His Majesty that you are safe." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399, Good Match. The third prince was so happy that the railcar promoted by Li Ju could play an important role that he was completely unaware that the officials who greeted him and his subordinates and eunuchs had already fought several rounds without bloodshed. "We won't take this car. Although the car is fast and stable, it still needs to stop in a lot of places. Besides, there are so many of us and we have occupied their place. We should enter the city as soon as possible." Under the insistence of the third prince, everyone untied the carriage and handed it over to the attendants of the Ministry of Internal Affairs to send it into the palace. The third prince himself and his attendants and bodyguards rode fast horses back to the capital from the highway. After entering the palace gate, the third prince first reported to His Majesty the Emperor. This round of reporting was very simple. The third prince gave a brief account. The father and son saw that each other looked well and had no signs of illness or worry. His Majesty the Emperor asked the third prince to retreat to the harem to pay respects to His Majesty the Queen. The Queen had nothing to say this time. She just saw that he was still energetic, so she asked the concubine Shu, who had been waiting here early, to talk to the third prince and his mother. It was only a few words, and then the third prince changed his clothes and came out and gathered with his elder brother, second brother, fourth brother, and sisters who had returned earlier. Then, the queen called them to have a meal together, and this was the time for a serious chat. The queen understood that concubine Shu had not seen her son in the past few years, so she only touched her chopsticks for the sake of courtesy and then left first, saying that she had something to do, leaving the emperor, concubine Shu, and the third prince to have a small gathering. It was hard to say what Her Majesty the Queen was thinking, and everyone seemed to have tacitly agreed that the Queen was generous and tolerant and not jealous. Her Majesty the Queen had never felt sour because her husband favored others. It seemed to be tolerance, but it also seemed that she had no feelings of admiration for the emperor, and it seemed that she was too good at hiding her personal emotions. Even Princess Chengyang could not see her mother's worries. After Chengyang got married, she was indifferent to Prince Consort Yang, but she was still very uncomfortable when she encountered the incident of Sister Shan. In this comparison, Her Majesty the Queen seemed too generous. Concubine Shu was also very strange. She was arranged by the Empress to get along with the Emperor and his son, but she did not take the opportunity to curry favor with him. Instead, she kept praising the Empress for her thoughtfulness. For example, she was invited to watch operas to relieve boredom, and she was asked to participate in the process of choosing a daughter-in-law early, and she was asked to spend some time with the selected ladies in private, etc. The emperor was very happy with the atmosphere of a virtuous wife and respectful concubines. The third prince felt a little uncomfortable. He had seen wives and concubines fighting for favor outside. He always pretended to be a commoner and mixed with the people. He saw with his own eyes the sadness and anger of his wives and concubines when their husbands had new lovers. Looking at the harmony in the palace, there was always something strange. However, after all, it was the deep care from his father and 2 mothers. Even if the third prince felt strange, he would not say anything to his face, but he felt more distressed for his 2 mothers in his heart. When the topic turned to the third prince's marriage, the third prince's ears perked up. At first, he heard people talking about which young man in the capital was good, which family had a grandson, and who became relatives. Gradually, they mentioned whose daughter also participated in the selection, and who was suitable for whom. Unfortunately, it was too late to say it now. Finally, concubine Shu asked in a joking tone, "I wonder whose family this Miss Shen will end up with. My son, your father is here too. Let's talk about personal matters. What kind of person do you want to find? If there is someone you like, I will ask for her for you. If not, I will just look for someone you like. I don't want you to be successful or do any job, because that's the tone of men outside. I just hope that you will have a virtuous wife and filial sons, and that you will have grandchildren around you, and that you and your family can move out of the palace and live a good life." His Majesty the Emperor was also curious. The third prince was usually honest and not meddlesome. He always felt that the few people he saw were either too smart and easy to control the third prince, or too honest, and he was afraid that the couple would be too stupid. Concubine Shu was really just asking jokingly. She always felt that the third prince was still as inexplicable as usual. Unexpectedly, the third prince froze, his face flushed slightly, and he seemed a little embarrassed and nervous. His Majesty the Emperor was surprised, looking at this reaction. Could it be that they had an affair outside? Yes, the third prince is young, and it is the time for him to admire young women. Usually, the third prince does not like to connect with young men and women outside the palace, so most of the women he is familiar with are palace maids. Palace maids are all obedient people who follow the rules, and they may not be able to share the same interests with the third prince. It is inevitable that he will meet a woman he likes during his 2 years away from home, and maybe even get married. His son is 18 years old this year. Do you have a girl you like? Whose girl? From Jiangnan, Shandong, Guangdong, a lady from a noble family, or a beautiful girl from a humble family, or a lowly family? Is she beautiful, gentle, or well educated? His Majesty the Emperor asked with great interest, without any intention of blaming him, which made concubine Shu snort twice. "Your Majesty, how dare you ask like that?" After scolding her, concubine Shu was curious herself. "Is it the girl from the Zhang family, your study partner, or your cousin?" The Emperor said again, "Tell me about it. If she is really suitable, I will say that she will be your wife or concubine. I can't force your marriage to break up. Then you can go to Jinling to pay homage to her. Well, but then you can never come back." His Majesty the Emperor thought of that heartless girl in Yu Yaoniang, and couldn't help but mention her in his words, which made the third prince blush. Concubine Shu also echoed, "That's right, your Majesty, I, and your mothers, were all scared by the incident 2 years ago. We think that our family is the richest in the world, and no matter how rich others are, they can't surpass us. We don't want to choose any daughters from aristocratic families. Your own happiness is the most important thing. If you already have someone you like, tell your father to avoid delays." The third prince was encouraged by his parents, and said with gritted teeth, "Let your Majesty know that your son wants to marry. I want to marry Zhao, the sister of Jinling, Fengrang Marquis, who is also his official, as my wife." His Majesty the Emperor and concubine Shu were stunned at the same time. Concubine Shu had a close relationship with Jiangnan and knew a lot. She heard about it when Sanjiu was sent to Jinling by Li Ju, especially when the Ministry of Internal Affairs finally asked Sanjiu to decorate the place where Princess Cheng Guiyang stayed, and Cheng Guiyang and Sanjiu had a very good relationship. Later, when Li Ju was conferred the title of Marquis of Fengrang, he appointed Zhao Sanjiu as an official, and asked Zhao Sanjiu to be in charge of all industrial affairs. Concubine Shu knew all these things. In the dead of night, concubine Shu had never envied Sanjiu's good life. Since she had such talent, there was such a bull who was willing to open up a battlefield for her to conquer despite gossip. It should be known that many women in ancient and modern times are no worse than Zhao Sanjiu, but there is no such stage for them to display. Only when the situation is chaotic and they have the opportunity to stand out. Sanji, who is doing the duties of a man as a woman in such a prosperous age. Isn't it enviable? Concubine Shu believes that she is no worse than Zhao Sanjiu, but she has never had the opportunity to display her talents. Now even her son wants to marry Sanjiu. Her son is not as old-fashioned and strict as his father. If the marriage is successful, Sanjiu's battlefield will only get bigger. Concubine Shu wanted to say something, but habitually waited for His Majesty the Emperor to speak, and had no intention of speaking first. Over a long period of time, she has formed the habit of expressing her wishes cautiously, and His Majesty the Emperor was really surprised. He did not expect that the third prince was interested in her talent or ability. The first thought that came to his mind was, how beautiful is this person? To attract Marquis Fengrang to ask her to serve as an official in the Marquis mansion against all odds, and to make this silly boy of his family willing to use the position of the principal wife to treat such a widow. Doesn't he know that this position can also win over a good Yu family? Why is my son so stupid? Chapter 400. It turns out to be her. It was impossible to grant a marriage. How could a young and ignorant boy be the first wife of the prince? Even if the emperor approved it and granted the marriage today, he would definitely be forced to withdraw the decision tomorrow by the imperial tutor, the university scholar, the censor, etc. This is a matter of great importance. Your principal wife is the mother of the emperor's grandson and a role model for ladies of noble birth. How can you easily give her to someone else? I need to think about it carefully. Your mother must also meet the girl, and the girl must also meet the standards of virtue, speech, appearance and merit. Otherwise, how can she convince the public? Wait for a while. His Majesty the Emperor expressed his refusal. The third prince showed disappointment. My son obeys your order. But I don't know when mother will summon Madame Zhao. His Majesty the Emperor glared at him unhappily. When will it be? Concubine Shu tried to ease the situation and said, you child, you just came back and talked for a while, and you started talking about other people. Your mother is jealous. The third prince curled his lips. Well, wait a while. Please ask father, mother, and mother Shu to see Madame Zhao with their own eyes, and then I will come to ask father for his favor. His Majesty the Emperor asked curiously, if you can't let her go, please ask the queen to issue an order to bring her into the palace, to educate her for a few days, and grant her to you as Baolin, or even Rosie. Why do you insist on taking an ordinary person who once sold herself as a slave as your principal wife? In addition to the fact that she had sold herself as a slave, Yu Yaoniang was a widow with a daughter, which was even worse. It was not that His Majesty the Emperor thought it was bad. His Majesty the Emperor himself had a concubine, so how could he despise a widow? It was just that the ministers outside were unhappy and would definitely cause trouble. His Majesty the Emperor was getting older, and he was impatient to argue with people outside about these trivial matters. The third prince put down the soup and chopsticks in his hands, stood up and bowed to His Majesty the Emperor. His serious expression made the Emperor's scalp numb. Father, I understand what you said, but I think your opinion is a little biased. When Concubine Shu heard this, she felt a headache. The father and son were going to fight in the harem. She didn't say anything, and hurriedly got up to visit Her Majesty the Queen and thank her for asking for the Emperor's order to invite Zhao Sanjiu to Beijing, and she slipped away directly. Whether His Majesty the Emperor won the debate or his son won the debate, Concubine Shu was always a little embarrassed there, and it was not right to interrupt, and it was not right not to interrupt. It was better to leave than to be in a dilemma. His Majesty the Emperor didn't want to argue with his son, especially the third prince, who was so simple-minded. His Majesty the Emperor knew that the third prince was honest by nature, stubborn, and sincere. It was precisely because he knew that his son was a good person that he was unwilling to get angry for his son. He was still eagerly hoping that Concubine Shu could suppress it, but he didn't expect Concubine Shu to run away so quickly and agilely. After the third prince finished his ceremony, he said seriously, Your Majesty, what you said just now is inappropriate. Although I'm a prince, I'm also Your Majesty's subject. Although the people are common people, they are also Your Majesty's subjects. How can it not be a good match for subjects to match subjects? After hearing the first few sentences, concubine Shu took faster steps to evade, walked straight out of the emperor's bedroom, then got on the sedan chair, and went straight to the pepper room. The queen was in the greenhouse at this time, staring at the flowers and trees from the south sent by Yu Yaoniang. The child of concubine Shu is back, but what about my child? Yaoniang is so beautiful, and Li Ju is so well behaved. He has tied her up, and made her linger, but she is unwilling to come back to see her old mother. What a cruel and heartless man. When she comes back, I will leave her alone for 3 days. The greenhouse has been changed to a combination of colored windows and transparent glass. After careful layout, potatoes, corn, peonies, and peonies bloom together, which is surprisingly harmonious. The bright places are bright, and the gorgeous places are gorgeous. Every step is a scene, which is very elegant. A clump of Xiangfei bamboo is dotted with spots, which in the eyes of the queen seem to be the tears she shed because of missing her daughter. The palace servant reported that concubine Shu was here, and the queen set up a table under the colored windows next to the greenhouse, and invited concubine Shu to sit down. The two concubines have been friends for more than 10 years. When concubine Shu saw the queen's expression, she knew that she was missing her daughter. The eldest girl doesn't want to attract any unnecessary attention in Beijing, so she doesn't want to come back. The queen really misses her, so why not quietly invite the eldest girl back to spend a long time with her and then send her to Jingling. I heard that the canal has been connected with the rail car of Lyon, so the round trip is much faster. I know that, but as a mother, how can I control my heart missing my child? And Lekan is a girl. I will be worried about her every day when she is not in front of me. When the third prince was away, the concubine did the same. Especially when there was a flood in the south of the Yangtze River and drought and locusts in Guangdong. The concubine and the queen worshipped Buddha and prayed for peace every day. God knows that they don't believe in Buddhism or Taoism at all. The concubine comforted the queen for a while, and the queen calmed down for a while. After redoing her makup, she became the dignified and kind queen mother as usual. I'm sorry for losing my composure for a moment. Why didn't you spend more time with Sanlang and instead came to me? We two sisters see each other day and night in the palace, and we have a long time to live. Sanlang will be granted marriage next year, and then he will be conferred a title. It won't be as convenient to see him then as it is now. Don't you take this opportunity to spend more time with him? The concubine replied, Your Highness doesn't know that Sanlang is arguing with His Majesty again. The reason is that Sanlang has a sweetheart in Jiangnan, and he must marry her as his principal wife. His Majesty showed that the woman was not worthy of being Sanlang's principal wife, and now Sanlang is arguing with His Majesty about whether she is suitable or not. The woman is a widow, and I felt embarrassed listening to her, so I hid away. After saying this, the concubine took a sip of the almond milk tea specially prepared by the queen. It was a new recipe from Yu Yaoniang, and it was indeed mellow and fragrant. The queen said, Then you should be there. Although the dispute is about suitability, in the final analysis, it is still about choosing someone for Sanlang and a daughter-in-law for you. Concubine Shu said, Your Majesty is his stepmother, and Sanlang's principal wife is also your daughter-in-law. Your Majesty is not panicking, so why should I be panicking? Even if the sky falls, there is the queen to support it, so let me have some peace for a moment. The queen said, You have been avoiding gossip more and more these years, and I'm afraid that gossip will soon find you. If your Majesty is persuaded by Sanlang, and really gives the widow you mentioned to Sanlang as his principal wife, what will you do? That's fine, Sanlang likes it anyway. I think I understand that the most important thing for a couple to live in harmony. Sanlang has a lot of things to do outside the court. Doesn't he just want to relax when he comes home? If I marry him someone he doesn't like, he might be upset, and then there will be trouble outside and at home, which won't be good. Besides, I've heard of that girl. She's a good one, not a loss. Even though her status is a little lower, she's a very good person. A lower status is a good thing. On the one hand, your Majesty may not compensate him a little, and on the other hand, it can avoid some trouble. When the queen heard this, she knew from concubine Shu's tone that the third prince's sweetheart was clearly described, and she couldn't help but feel curious. Have you heard of her? Who is that girl? Guess. If I tell you who this person is, you'll know. I dare to make a bold prediction. If you know who it is, you will sigh and say, it turned out to be her. No wonder the third prince is thinking about her. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.